Chapter 12:20. Oh, yes, yes. Quick, send someone to ask General Qing for help, quick. At this moment, as if he had just woken up from a dream, Aleifu shouted loudly. Then, the sound of hurriedly putting on armor rang out in the tent. Outside the tent, the sky was filled with flames and the sounds of people shouting and horses neighing could be heard. The moment before the charge, there was a flurry of fire arrows that burned countless tents and dealt a heavy blow to the unprepared Yi'erqiang army. Taking advantage of this chaos, Commander Tong Long took the lead and charged into the enemy's camp. With a swing of his sword, he beheaded 2 Yi'erqiang cavalrymen who were charging towards him. His bravery gave the 5-star Corps cavalrymen behind him a boost of morale, greatly reducing the Yi'erqiang cavalrymen's morale. Who dares to sneak into the camp? You're courting death. The deputy general appeared. As Aleifu's deputy, he wasn't so careless. Even when he slept with his clothes on. This allowed him to react in the shortest time possible. Once the deputy general's roar sounded, the Yi'erqiang cavalrymen who ran out of the tents couldn't help but be delighted. Everyone seemed to have found their backbone and began to hold their weapons, looking for war horses and preparing to counterattack. I think you're courting death. Tong Long, who had just killed 2 people, heard the deputy general's roar and his eyes lit up. Although he didn't know the identity of the other party, his intuition told him that the person in front of him should be someone important. With his status, killing such a person would give him a sense of accomplishment and cause a heavy blow to the Yi'erqiang army. His legs clamped onto the horse's body and Tong Long rushed out. Along the way, he killed several people and rushed in front of the deputy general. Watch my blade. The deputy general was shocked by Tong Long's speed and anxiously slashed out with his blade. Tong Long, who was already prepared, just leaned to the side on his horse and dodged the slash. Then, the saber in his hand slashed towards the other party's waist. The saber borrowed the horse's momentum and with just one slash, there was a piercing sound as the saber and the armor came into close contact. He relied on the armor to protect his life. Even so, there was still a bloody wound that was half the length of an arm on his body. Pain enveloped the deputy general's entire body. He forced himself to take a deep breath and turned around to leave. The facts had already proven that he was no match for General Lai. He was seriously injured in just one move. If they continued to fight, he would lose his life here. There was nothing shameful about running away when they couldn't win. However, it would weaken their morale, especially when 2 armies were fighting. As a general, such an action was likely to lead to the collapse of the army. However, at this moment, in order to save his own life, the deputy general didn't think so much. He just wanted to rush out and find a place to heal himself. However, this idea of his was destined to never be realized, because Tong Long had already locked onto him with his first strike. After the 2 of them passed by each other, Tong Long turned his horse around. Seeing the scene of the deputy general fleeing, a murderous intent flashed in his eyes. He put away his saber and took out his strong bow from his back. With the help of the light from the torches around him, an arrow quickly left the bowstring and shot towards the unsuspecting deputy general. The sound of the arrow piercing through the air rang out. If it was just 2 people fighting one-on-one, the deputy general would definitely be alerted. However, the entire camp was in chaos now. How could he care about such things? The deputy general was only trying his best to escape on his horse and leave this place. Whoosh! The long arrow pierced through his body. Under the powerful force, it pierced through his chest from his back. The deputy general felt a sudden heart-wrenching pain in his body. Then, his head drooped and his hands lost strength. He fell from his horse head to the ground. 1 saber and 1 arrow took the life of the deputy general. Tong Long's bravery was indeed not to be underestimated. After killing the deputy general, he laughed and put away his strong bow. He picked up his curved horse and shouted loudly. Your general is already dead. Why don't you surrender? This shout was as loud as thunder, and the sound spread far and wide. Deputy Commander Zhao Xing, who was leading 1,000 cavalrymen as the reserve camp, was currently leading them in shooting arrows that were lit on fire. His mission was very simple. It was to burn as many of the Qing army's tents as possible under the chaos. In the darkness of the night, they would give the impression that they had the numbers advantage. "Deputy Commander, listen." "Is that the commander's voice?" One of the 5-star Army's cavalrymen with sharp ears stopped shooting the fire arrows and asked Vice Commander Zhao Xing. Zhao Xing also stopped what he was doing and listened carefully. Then, he really heard Tong Long's shout. He laughed and said, "Good. The commander is indeed brave. In such a short time, you killed the enemy's general. Come, everyone, let's shoot arrows and shout at the same time. Let's maximize the effect." Regardless of whether it was Zhao Xing or Tong Long, they didn't know that it was the deputy general of the Qing army. However, this didn't stop them from shouting. At the very least, the deputy general was still a general. The impact of the shout from one person to 1,000 people shouting was completely different. In just a short moment, this shout spread throughout the entire Qing camp, causing the already chaotic camp to become even more chaotic. When the Qing soldiers heard the shout, they weren't sure if it was true or not. However, at this moment, they would rather believe it than not. Otherwise, they would have to pay the most precious price, their lives. With the general dead, the morale of the soldiers fell to the freezing point. The Qing soldiers who were still resisting with their blades started to flee in batches. They wanted to escape under the cover of the night. None of them wanted to die. When Aleifu walked out of the tent in armor under the protection of his personal guards, this was the scene he saw. When he heard the shouts that the general was dead and they still didn't want to surrender, Aleifu said angrily, "Bullshit, this general is still alive and well." "Who said I'm dead?" "General, be careful with your words." A personal guard at the side immediately reached out to cover his mouth and said with a panicked expression, "What are you doing?" Aleifu reached out and slapped his hand away, his face full of anger. "General, the one who died just now must be the deputy general. Now that the morale of the army is in chaos, it won't help if you stand out. Instead, you'll attract the attention of the enemy. The gains don't make up for the losses." The personal guard's mind was still clear at this moment and he expressed his worries. Aleifu, who originally wanted to punish the personal guard, was stunned when he heard this. Then, he broke out in cold sweat. Yes, at this time, the morale of the army was in chaos and there was no way to effectively counterattack. If he stood out now, not only would he not be able to solve the problem, he might even attract the attention of the enemy cavalry. If that happened, he would probably follow in the footsteps of the deputy general. At the same time, Aleifu patted the personal guard's shoulder. "You did well. What do you think we should do now?" "General, the Han people have a saying. A gentleman doesn't stand under a collapsing wall. Let's retreat first. As long as we're here, there will be a day when Dong Shan rises again." This personal guard was indeed somewhat knowledgeable. It wasn't easy for him to say such a thing at this time. These words were to Aleifu's liking. He immediately nodded. "You're right. How about this, we'll retreat immediately." As he spoke, Aleifu even took the initiative to take off the armor he just wore. Clearly, he didn't want to expose himself because of this set of clothes. However, what happened next proved that Aleifu was thinking too much. Because from start to finish, Tong Long didn't have the intention to kill him. Their goal was to create chaos here and force Yi Erqiang's cavalry to retreat. Then, they would attack the Turpan cavalry in the middle of the army. Yes, this was the true goal of the Liaodong Cavalry Corps. After suffering once, General Dai Qin became much more careful in his actions. Even if the 5-star army didn't make any moves, he still arranged for many soldiers to be on guard. This was to prevent the 5-star army from launching a sneak attack. For this reason, He sent out hundreds of cavalry scouts, but the result was exactly the same. It was impossible to break into the battlefield from the front, which was guarded. This was also why the new army didn't attack first. Instead, they let the Liaodong Cavalry Corps fire the first arrow. If the Turpan cavalry didn't create chaos, they wouldn't have a chance. And whether or not they could create chaos all depended on the Liaodong Cavalry Corps. With only 5,000 cavalry, not only did they have to break through Yi Erqiang's 30,000 cavalry camp, they also had to deal a heavy blow to the Turpan cavalry. From this, it could be seen how difficult this mission was. This was also where Su He's worries came from. Fortunately, Tong Long had won the first battle. He had caught the Yi Erqiang cavalry by surprise and even killed their deputy general. He had completely disrupted the morale of the army and perfectly completed the first step of the battle plan. Tong Long sighed as he watched the Yi Erqiang soldiers, who had turned from cavalry to infantry, scurrying away like rats. What a pity! How many prisoners were there? Unfortunately, he still had things to do and couldn't stop to take care of them. A pained expression flashed across Tong Long's heart as he pointed his saber forward, pointing at the Turpan camp in the distance as he shouted, "Brothers of the reinforced regiment, charge with this regiment commander! Charge!" Turpan camp. The Yi Erqiang camp on the left suddenly lit up with flames. This naturally shocked everyone. General Daiqin, who was still sleeping, jumped up and rushed out of the camp. He looked to the west and his eyes flashed with worry. Report, the 5-star army suddenly charged into the Yi Erqiang camp. The two sides are fighting. A scout galloped to the front of General Daiqin and reported. Scout again. I want to know how many people they have. Daiqin said without changing his expression. Report, General Alefu sent people to ask for help. He said they can't hold on anymore. After a while, another scout galloped to report. Chapter 12:21. Anger flashed across Daiqin's face. The 30,000 cavalry couldn't hold on anymore. In his opinion, this was simply because Astral didn't want to resist and didn't want to fight head-on with the 5-star army. It was just a way to preserve his strength. Even if we can't hold on, we still have to ignore them. Daiqin snorted coldly. How could it be so easy to win without putting in any effort? Daiqin believed that even if the 30,000 cavalry met with a sudden attack, it would only be a temporary panic. As long as they stayed true to their hearts, they would be able to quickly turn the situation around. There was nothing to be worried about. What he was worried about was the fact that he didn't understand. Who were these 5-star cavalry that suddenly appeared? How many people were there? How did they appear on the west side without anyone noticing? The answer to this question was quickly revealed. This was because Tong Long had already led 4,000 cavalrymen towards the Turpan camp. Because there were already scouts keeping an eye on the situation, the moment Tong Long and the others made their move, they were immediately discovered by the scouts of the Turfan army and reported back. On the way back, they met some Turpan cavalry who were guarding the front. When they heard that someone was coming from the side, they immediately went up to meet them. On the battlefield, there was a saying that the commander's orders were not to be given out. Now that the 5-star army was right in front of them, the Turpan cavalry in charge of guarding the front couldn't just sit there and do nothing. In reality, even if they didn't meet them, Tong Long would have brought his army over. This was his important mission. Good timing. Seeing that the enemy was about to meet them, Tong Long laughed loudly. Then, with less than 4,000 men, they charged straight at the 3,000 cavalry. With the advantage in numbers and the imposing killing intent, both sides left behind many corpses and blood after just one clash. The enemy is so strong, request for reinforcements. In the same clash, the Turpan general, who had lost hundreds of cavalrymen, sensed an immense sense of danger. As he swung his saber through the air, he yelled loudly to the soldiers beside him. The personal guard turned around and rode away. Not long after, a group of 3,000 Turpan cavalrymen who were also tasked with guarding the defensive line arrived. As they left, the Turpan defense fell into a weakened state. The new army scouts who were in charge of understanding the situation shot out a signal gun into the sky. A bright red light shot into the sky, appearing so eye-catching and bright in the silent night. Let's go. In front of the new army tent, General Suhi finally received the signal to act. He immediately roared and the 30,000 five-star army cavalry charged out like a pack of wolves. However, unlike before, they didn't shout. Under the heavy protection of the horses' mouths and hooves, the 30,000 cavalry charged forward like ghosts, approaching the Turpan front lines. It was only a distance of 10 li. The new army cavalry, who were prepared, only took 5 to 6 minutes to charge out. However, these 5 to 6 minutes were like torture for the Liaodong cavalry regiment. General Dai Qin, who had been injured once, was very careful this time. Just the cavalry at the front of the camp alone numbered 15,000. They were split into 5 groups, each of which was 3,000 cavalry. When Tong Long brought the 4,000 cavalry and charged in, a total of 3 groups of 9,000 Turpan cavalry entered the battlefield. With double the number advantage, they quickly surrounded the Liaodong cavalry regiment. Not only that, Dai Qin, who had received the news, had already called all the cavalry in the camp. He arranged for the generals to come to the camp for a meeting while ordering all the cavalry to put on their armor and get on their horses. This time, Dai Qin's reaction was extremely fast. Even though he hadn't seen through the 5-star army's plan of attack, he relied on his advantage in numbers and made up his mind to take down the thousands of 5-star army cavalry that he had surrounded. General Dan, you bring 5,000 cavalry to stabilize the northern line, in case the 5-star army's main force suddenly invades. General Tong, you bring 5,000 cavalry to continue the encirclement of the 5-star army. This time, we can't let any of them escape. The other generals quickly prepare for battle and wait for the order to attack. At the same time, send someone to contact General Wu Liji and tell him to also prepare to attack the 5-star army. Dai Qin quickly made a series of arrangements and the generals quickly headed out of the tent. Then, a messenger came to report that on the main battlefield, the 5-star army had indeed launched an attack. 2 groups of 6,000 cavalry were fighting with their lives on the line. They came so fast. General Dai Qin's eyes flashed with surprise, but he quickly calmed down. He was confident in his cavalry. As long as they could hold on for a while, once the 5-star army was completely wiped out, he would be free to deal with the enemy at the front. At that time, with the help of the 30,000 cavalrymen from Yili, a beautiful counterattack wouldn't be a problem for them to achieve victory. At this time, on the main battlefield, the intense battle had just begun. The new army was already prepared. Under the cover of the night, they were only discovered when they were a mile away from the Turpan cavalry. Then, both sides first engaged in a battle of long-range archery. After both sides suffered casualties, the close combat battle began. On the side of the new army, the one in charge of the vanguard was the new army's 1st Cavalry Division's commander, Kulu. To be able to become the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Kulu's strength was obviously above normal commanders. This time, he was the vanguard. It could be seen that Suhi had high hopes for him. Therefore, in the first charge, the 1st Cavalry Division fully displayed their ferocious momentum. At one point, they fiercely suppressed the 2 battalions, 6,000 Turpan cavalry, and forced them to retreat. When they gained the upper hand in the first battle and the situation was better than he had expected, he was both excited and worried. He was excited because the number of enemy cavalry was less than he had expected. He originally thought that with the strength of the Liaodong cavalry regiment, after messing up Yi Erqiang's cavalry camp, it would be good enough to attract the attention of the 2 Turpan cavalry units. Now, it seemed that the effect was even better. They actually attracted a total of 3 units. This reduced the pressure on him on the battlefield by a lot, allowing him to complete his mission better. He was excited. What he was worried about was that the Liaodong cavalry regiment, which only had 5,000 people, was surrounded by enemy cavalry several times their number. Every minute was torture. If they couldn't meet up with the enemy, they wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Attack with full force. No matter what, we have to open up a bloody path to meet up with the Liaodong cavalry division. Kulu rode on the horse and constantly observed the situation in front of him. He sent an order to the messenger beside him. Before the order was given, another cavalry scout ran over. Before the person arrived, his voice was already loud. Division Commander, the Turpan cavalry has increased. 5,000 cavalry are coming towards us. 5,000 cavalry are going to the left flank. What? Hearing the Turpan cavalry's quick reaction, Kulu's face became a little ugly. The enemy's quick reaction obviously increased the difficulty of the following plan. Narrowing his eyes, Kulu quickly suppressed the nervousness in his heart. After forcing himself to calm down, he suddenly shouted, "Men, inform the first captain, Wu Ba, to go and rescue the first unit of the Liaodong cavalry regiment. In short, even if you have to use your body, you have to create a way out for me." The first regiment commander Wu Ba, as his name suggested, was abnormally tall and sturdy. He weighed no less than 80 kilograms, and his body was 8 feet tall, 1.84 meters tall. Logically speaking, this kind of weight wasn't suitable for cavalry. This was because the problem of weight would inevitably increase the burden on the warhorse. However, Wu Ba was tall and agile. Later on, he was specially recruited to be a member of the cavalry. Because of his size, his warhorse was also specially allocated, and belonged to the very tall category. At the same time, Wu Ba was also a subordinate that Kulu admired very much. At the time, he was the 1st Regiment commander of the 1st Cavalry Division. This time, Kulu sent him to reinforce the reinforced regiment. This was enough to prove that he valued this ally very much. The moment Kulu gave the order, the other officers from the division headquarters were all stunned. One of them said with a face of worry, "Wu Ba is leading the main force of our 1st Cavalry Division. Now, there are still 5,000 Turpan cavalry coming at us. Why don't we send other regimental commanders to rescue the reinforced regiment?" "Other regiments? Who's up to the task?" Kulu asked without any explanation. Then, he shook his head and said, "This division commander knows what you are thinking. With Wu Ba gone, the pressure on us will definitely increase. However, this division commander still has to do this. When we came here, the division commander gave an absolute order that the reinforced regiment must be rescued. They are risking their lives for us. If something really happens, how will others look at us? How will Bugnam of Gojoseon look at us?" After asking a few questions in one breath, Kulu saw that the other officers seemed to have something to say. He directly waved his hand and said, "All right, this division commander's orders cannot be changed. If you have any objections, you can convey them to the division commander after the battle." On the battlefield, the division commander had the final say. It was precisely because of this that the morale of the army could be guaranteed. As for whether there would be different opinions on the battlefield, that would be decided by the division commander. Since Kulu had said this, even if the other officers had different opinions, they could only obey. After giving this order, Kulu's gaze involuntarily turned towards the Ili camp on the other side. According to the battle plan formulated by the new army, the Liaodong Cavalry Reinforced Regiment was responsible for messing up the Yarkiang camp and charging towards the Turpan camp. The 1st Cavalry Division was responsible for attacking the Turpan camp from the front. These plans revolved around one goal, and that was to create an opportunity for the other 3 cavalry divisions of the new army to attack the Ili camp. Chapter 12:22. Since it was an allied army, the most important thing was the alliance. If this alliance could be broken, the 3 allied armies would become 3 isolated armies. At that time, the 5-star armies would be able to attack whoever they wanted to attack when faced with their weakened enemies. Breaking the alliance naturally became the most important issue. After the discussion, the new 3 armies set their sights on their old rival, the 30,000 cavalrymen of Yi Libao. The reason why they chose them was because they were the closest to Baiming. If they attacked from there, they wouldn't have to worry about enemies suddenly appearing. Secondly, they had defeated the Ili cavalry before. They knew the strength of the 5-star army. With this shadow, they would have a higher chance of defeating them. That's right, defeating them, not defeating them. Rather than injuring 10 fingers, the new 3rd army would rather lose some soldiers and horses. This time, they wanted to deal a heavy blow to Yi Li's 30,000 cavalrymen. Only then would they be able to defeat the so-called Allied army. It had to be known that not long ago, the 1st Cavalry Division had taken over Hobak-Seli City. It was equivalent to cutting off the Ili cavalry's retreat to the north. If they heavily injured the Ili cavalry here, they would definitely become very obedient. When they couldn't even take care of themselves, the so-called Allied army would collapse on its own. Just as Kalu was looking at the Ili cavalry camp, the new army's commander Su He was leading 3 cavalry divisions to surround the Ili cavalry division. Relying on the concealment of the horses' hooves and mouths, when the 3 cavalry divisions suddenly appeared in front of the Ili cavalry camp, it gave Wuli Ji a big fright. When the flames in the west reached the sky, he had already gotten out of bed. He put on his armor and began to gather the troops. Following that, news spread that the 5-star army had begun to break through the enemy and attack the Turpan cavalry camp. When he received this news, Wuli Ji's heart was sweeter than honey. In his eyes, the situation was very clear. This time, the 5-star army's target was definitely Turpan and Yarqiang. He could stay out of it and watch it all as a bystander. Just now, General Daiqin sent someone to ask for help. Of course, he agreed, but he didn't send a single soldier. From the bottom of his heart, it was true that the 5-star army was his enemy, but what about the Turpan kingdom? Wouldn't it be great to be able to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight? Wouldn't it be great to be able to reap the benefits while the 2 enemies fought? He wasn't stupid enough to immediately send troops to help Turpan. Of course, due to their relationship as allies, he would definitely send out his troops. However, he had to grasp the timing well. He had to wait until the Turfan army could no longer hold on before he made his move. This way, he would be able to deal a heavy blow to the 5-star army and also gain the reputation of saving the Turfan army. Wouldn't it be the best of both worlds? Wuli Ji had fought with the 5-star army before and even attacked the first city with the Wara. He was much clearer about the strength of the 5-star army compared to the other 2 countries. This was an opponent that wasn't to be trifled with. They were well equipped and their soldiers were well trained. How could such an opponent be defeated so easily? It wasn't too late to wait for his allies to exhaust the strength of the 5-star army before he made his move. Let's fight, the more intense the better. In the end, the winner will only be us. Wuli Ji grinned and let out a laugh. However, this laughter didn't last long. Soon, a scout appeared in front of him and said with a panicked expression. The 5-star army suddenly came and had already clashed with the cavalry at the first line of defense. However, because the enemy had too many people, the front line couldn't hold on much longer. What? How is this possible? When Wuli Ji heard this news, he stood there as if he was petrified. He didn't move for more than 10 breaths of time. It wasn't until the deputy beside him reminded him that he came back to his senses. Then, he walked towards the high platform in the middle of the camp. He wanted to see with his own eyes how many soldiers and horses the 5-star army had sent. It would have been better if he didn't take a look. Now that he took a look, he saw that under the night sky, there were flashing torches everywhere. He could hear the sounds of charging and killing. He felt that the enemy's cavalry wasn't less than his. 30,000 against 30,000, and they were completely unprepared. Wuli Ji could already guess the outcome of the battle. Because of this, he had a frightened expression on his face. After he came down from the high platform, he sent soldiers to stop the 5-star army from approaching. At the same time, he ordered people to ask General Daiqin for help. In front of the Turfan tent, Daiqin couldn't sit still anymore. He was currently in front of the tent observing the situation outside. Because of the moonlight, other than the sounds of killing and the movement of the torches, he couldn't see any useful information. However, he still didn't move. He believed that as long as he sat on the horse, it would be a symbol. As long as the soldiers saw him, they wouldn't panic and their morale would increase greatly. Daiqin, who had a mighty aura, was like a door god, unmoving like a mountain. It indeed gave the nearby Turfan cavalry a boost in morale. Many of them became braver because of this. They just wanted to perform better in front of the general. Although it was night time and their performance might not be seen by the general, many of them still held onto a fluke mentality and continued to do so. Not long later, good news came continuously. The 5-star army that came from the west was completely surrounded and could be destroyed at any time. The 5-star army's main force that came from the front was also blocked outside. Other than a few 2,000 war horses that managed to charge through the defensive circle, the rest of the 5-star army cavalry were blocked outside. Good. This news caused Dai Qin to be overjoyed. To be able to completely destroy a 5-star army, this was definitely a great achievement. When the king found out, he would definitely be heavily rewarded. At the same time, it would be a heavy blow to the 5-star army. It would let them know that the Turfan kingdom wasn't a pushover. Just as he was in a good mood, the young general that Wu Liji sent to ask for help came in front of Dai Qin. The moment he saw Dai Qin, he knelt on the ground and begged, "General, our camp is being attacked by the 5-star army. Please send reinforcements because we are allies." Oh. This news first made Dai Qin's entire body tremble. Then, his expression froze. However, after a few breaths of time, his face blossomed with an unnoticeable smile. "This young general, you said that your camp is being attacked by the 5-star army, but how many enemies are there?" So many, I can't even count." Hearing this, the young general raised his head and said in panic. However, in Dai Qin's eyes, he mistakenly thought that the panic was because the general was scared of him. Even if Wu Liji was trying to deceive him, he shouldn't have sent someone more mature. Thus, he coldly snorted and said, "All right, this general already knows about this matter. Please go back and tell Wu Liji that reinforcements will be arriving soon." "Yes, thank you, General Dai Qin." The young general let out a sigh of relief, as if he had completed an important mission. He hurriedly bowed and left. After the young general left, the other Turfan generals couldn't help but ask, "General, are you really going to send reinforcements?" "Send what?" "When we asked for reinforcements, they didn't send a single soldier." "What bullshit 5-star army's main force attacking, it's clearly an excuse not to send reinforcements." Whatever, we don't need to care about them. With our current strength, we can completely take the credit. We don't need other people's help. Dai Qin completely misunderstood. Of course, he couldn't be blamed for this. Who would have thought that the 5-star army's plan was to create a diversion? Furthermore, they first attacked Yarqiang Kingdom, then Turfan. Would they really attack Yili in the end? No one would believe that the pitiful Wu Liji would have to face the attacks of the new army alone. From the start of the new army's attack, it was extremely ferocious. In their hearts, they were clear that to create this opportunity, they had completely sacrificed the Liaodong cavalry regiment's benefits. Since their allies were willing to help them, they obviously couldn't just watch them die. This required them to increase the speed of their attacks. First, they had to heavily injure Yili, then they would be free to deal with Turfan's main force. Naturally, there was another important reason. That was, no one dared to say whether Turfan would suddenly send reinforcements to help Xiao Yili's main force. If they really did that, then they would truly be in danger. With these two main reasons, the new army's 3 main cavalry divisions, from the moment they started attacking, they were like brave giants. Anyone who dared to block their path would only have one result, death. Without any preparation, facing the fierce attacks of the 5-star army, the Turfan army was forced to retreat step by step. At this time, Wu Liji made an even more wrong decision. That was, he didn't send his entire army forward at once. Instead, he sent out 2,000 to 3,000 cavalry at once. He wanted to stop the attacks of the 5-star army. He wanted to leave behind enough troops to wait for the cavalry from Turfan Kingdom to join forces with them to counterattack the 5-star army. It was impossible for reinforcements to come. After the battle lasted for more than an hour, Wu Liji finally understood this point clearly. Less than half of his 30,000 cavalrymen were left after this battle. "I can't wait any longer." Seeing that the reinforcements from Turfan still hadn't arrived, Wu Liji's eyes flashed with anger. The distance between the two camps was only 5 li. If they rushed at full speed, they would arrive in an instant. However, after such a long time, not to mention a large batch of reinforcements, there wasn't even a shadow of reinforcements. At this moment, Wu Liji had completely lost his confidence. Chapter 12:23. Hearing Wu Liji say that they couldn't wait any longer, the other generals beside him all rubbed their palms together. They didn't have any history or experience fighting against the 5-star army. In their short-sighted eyes, it seemed that their Ili cavalry was the most tyrannical force under the heavens. They even yearned to fight against the 5-star army and obtain military merits. However, it was clear that they misunderstood Wu Liji's words. When he said that they couldn't wait any longer, it wasn't that he wanted to fight to the death with the 5-star army, but rather that he was prepared to retreat. If it wasn't Turpan's capital behind him, but Ili country's capital, Wu Liji would fight to the death. However, now wasn't the time to use his full strength. Since this battle was destined to be lost, what he needed to do was to bring more cavalry back and protect Ili country. Pass on the order. Wu Liji spat out these 2 words like a popping bean. Following this, the young generals beside him all became excited. What Air said next made these people's fighting spirit fall into a bottomless abyss. Pass down the order to retreat. Retreat? A young general thought that he had misheard and asked with a doubtful tone. Yes, retreat. We don't need to fight to the death with the 5-star army in order to protect Turpan's capital. Now, I order the entire army to retreat. Not only did Wu Liji decide to retreat, but he also decided to withdraw from this so-called alliance. He could see that everyone wasn't of one mind. Whenever they encountered a situation, they would only protect themselves and fight for themselves. What was the use of this alliance? What was the point of this alliance? Although doing this would cause the Turpan army to fall into danger, and even Turpan's capital behind them would be in the same situation. At the same time, it could affect the overall situation of the 3 countries' alliance. However, Wu Liji didn't think so much at this moment. If he insisted on staying, it was very likely that he would be completely surrounded by the 5-star army, or even be completely wiped out. This was a responsibility that he couldn't bear. Wu Liji decisively gave the order to retreat. Without waiting for the new army's main force to surround them, the front army turned around and fled. This caused the new army to lose a chance to wipe them out. Motherf *Ker, he runs really fast. Why don't we chase after him? The 3rd Cavalry Division's commander, Lei Chuandang, spoke with a displeased expression. He was in the middle of a killing spree when the enemy fled. They didn't even bring any food or military supplies with them. More than 10,000 captives were left inside and outside the tent. This was enough to prove his determination. There's no need for that. Commander Su he shook his head. A cornered beast would still put up a desperate fight. At this time, if they really caught up with Yi Li's cavalry, they would have no way to retreat. If Yi Li went all out, it was very likely that both sides would suffer. This was not what he wanted. Not to mention that the 1st Cavalry Division and the Liaodong Cavalry Regiment were in danger, especially the latter. Su He had to be saved. Su He had done so much for him, so it was reasonable for him to do his best to help. 4th Division, leave 2 regiments to clean up the battlefield. The rest of you, follow me and charge into the Turpan camp. When they heard that there was a big battle to fight, the other 3 division commanders' eyes lit up. They immediately replied, "Yes, sir." The Liaodong Cavalry Regiment. At this time, they were completely surrounded. As the first to charge out, Tong Long was covered in blood. Most of it was the enemy's, and some of it was his own. Since he suddenly appeared in the battle with Yi Erqiang, Tong Long hadn't stopped killing for a moment. Just the number of enemy cavalry who died in his hands was at least 60 to 70. There were even more who were injured. This fully demonstrated his reputation as a fierce general of Liaodong. However, at the same time, he also paid a big price. For example, of the 4,000 cavalry that charged out with him, there were now less than 500 left. Moreover, all of them were injured. Some were only holding on with their last breath. Even if their injuries were healed, it was impossible for them to gallop on horseback. After paying such a huge price, the results were satisfactory. Not only did they break through the camp of Yi Erqiang's 30,000 cavalrymen and force them to retreat, they also attracted the attention of 11,000 cavalrymen from the Turf Kingdom. Furthermore, they were able to keep a close eye on them, preventing them from being distracted. Facing 11,000 with 4,000, and being surrounded, Tong Long wasn't made of iron. The cavalry he brought weren't all as brave as he was. During this period of time, there were two huge dangers. However, one of them was blocked by Zhao Xing and the remaining 1,000 cavalry. When the second danger came, the new Army 1st Cavalry Division's 1st Regiment commander, Wu Ba, brought 2,000 cavalry and blocked it. With the appearance of two reinforcements, the pressure on Tong Long decreased by a lot. Just as they were about to charge out and kill their way out, another 3,000 Turpan cavalry came and joined the encirclement. At this point, Tong Long had already restrained 14,000 Turpan cavalry. This was already more than a third of Daiqin's forces. Another 3,000 cavalry surrounded them. No matter if it was Tong Long, Zhao Xing, or Wu Ba, their faces all became ugly. After exchanging glances, they all raised their heads and laughed out loud. Good, since that's the case, let's fight to the death. At most, we'll be men again in 18 years. Tong Long's wild laughter sounded so heroic and heroic in the night. That's right. 18 years later, we'll be heroes again. But even if we die, we can't let our enemies have an easy time. Next, let's see who kills more people. Leader Wu Ba also had a crazed smile on his face. This time, he brought a whole 2,000 cavalry over. However, there were less than 100 people left by his side. According to the rules of the army, when an army lost more than half of its members, they should retreat from the battlefield. However, his entire army was almost wiped out. Seeing the soldiers who had followed him for so many years leaving one after another, Wu Ba only had one thought in his mind, and that was to avenge his fallen comrades. He wanted to kill as many people as he could. Only then would he have the face to see his comrades who had left before him after he went to the Yellow Springs. Let's fight, who's afraid of who? Zhao Xing, who was the weakest in terms of personal strength but also had the guts, also roared. This was completely different from his usual scholarly side. From this, it could be seen that the cruel and bloody battlefield could change a person. Zhao Xing wasn't much better off. Of the last 1,000 cavalry he brought, there were less than 200 left. Luckily, because he joined the battle late, he only had a blade wound on his body. The three generals looked at the enemies surrounding them. At this moment, they no longer cared about life and death. In their eyes, there was only one word, revenge. At this point, the Turpan army wasn't much better off. Of the 14,000 troops, there weren't even half left. However, there were still over 5,000 people left. The ones surrounding them were still the few hundred 5-star army who were on the verge of death. They still held a significant advantage. General Tong, who was in charge of surrounding the 5-star army, stared with his eyes wide open. He was truly shocked by the performance of Tong Long and the others. He originally thought that with several times the number of the enemy and the fact that they were surrounded, it shouldn't be a problem to deal with the enemy. However, after fighting for so long, not only did he suffer heavy losses, he even suffered more than the enemy. This made him feel extremely humiliated. Now that he saw the enemy still shouting while surrounded, how could he let it go? He immediately pointed his saber forward and shouted, "Go, kill them all, kill them all. Kill!" General Tong was angry. The cavalry below took advantage of the fact that they had more people. After a loud shout, they all charged forward. At this moment, swords flashed and war horses galloped forward. A life and death battle was once again played out. Relying on the advantage of numbers, a 5-star army cavalry would often have to face 3 to 4 enemies or even more. In such a situation, death was inevitable. The only difference was how many enemies they could kill. With the thought that killing one was enough and killing two was worth it, the 5-star army cavalry soldiers didn't care about life and death. With the determination to fight to the death, they didn't defend and launched a final attack on the Turpan cavalry. Their morale was still high and they waved their sabers resolutely. But after all, they weren't made of iron. After using up most of their strength, the sabers in their hands gradually lost control. Even the horses under their butts were letting out muffled snorts. That was a sign that they were about to use up all their strength and were about to lose all their strength. However, at this moment, no one cared so much. When all the soldiers were prepared to die, in their eyes, death was no longer that scary. In their eyes, there was only killing the enemy. Only killing the enemy. In the face of death, the hundreds of soldiers of the 5-star army burst forth with their greatest potential. Many of them weren't killed by the Turpan cavalry, but by the exhaustion of their bodies. In the end, they couldn't even ride their horses and fell to the ground, unconscious. Among them was Commander Tong Long. When he launched the counterattack, he was the one who took the lead. Relying on his own bravery, he swung his saber almost instinctively, cutting down 4 sturdy Turkmen cavalrymen. When he swung his saber for the 5th time, due to the decrease in speed, it was finally blocked. Under the powerful rebound force, he lost his balance and fell off his warhorse. Commander! Tong Long's fall from his horse attracted the shouts of more than 10 soldiers who saw this scene. This shout also greatly stimulated the other 5-star army cavalry soldiers. They charged forward as if they had gone mad. Some of them didn't even have the strength to hold their sabers, but they still used their bodies to open up a path of blood. It was all for the sake of protecting Tong Long, who they didn't know whether he was dead or alive, from being trampled and killed by the Turpan cavalry. However, there was a limit to their madness, especially when they didn't have the strength to do so. As more and more 5-star army cavalry fell to the ground, the encirclement of the Turpan cavalry became smaller and smaller. In the end, Wu Ba and Zhao Xing were surrounded in an extremely small area with less than 50 cavalry soldiers. Chapter 12:24. Those who surrender will be spared. General Tong was also shocked by the reaction of these people before they died. Although they were enemies, he had to admit that this was an opponent worthy of respect. This was because in less than an hour, he had lost another 1,000 cavalrymen. This made him furious, but at the same time, he also secretly admired Lu Xian. Surrender? Ha ha ha, our 5-star army only has heroes who die in battle, not cowards who kneel. Wu Ba seemed to have heard the funniest joke in the world. After laughing wildly, he waved his heavy right arm and pointed forward. 5-star army soldiers, prepare for the final attack. It was indeed the final attack. Because everyone knew that with only 50 of them, they would not be able to change the outcome of the battle. This final attack was the time for them to show their worth as soldiers. Wu Ba's heroism caused General Tong's expression to change again. But soon, his eyes flashed with a murderous intent. Although he admired these 5-star troops and admitted that they were indeed brave warriors, he still had to kill them because they were serving their own masters. This was the duty of a soldier. Everyone, get ready to charge. The battle was about to start. There was no doubt about the outcome. With 4,000 soldiers fighting 50 cavalrymen, and 50 cavalrymen covered in wounds, there was no doubt about the outcome. Wu Ba and General Tong raised their sabers. At the same time, Wu Ba and General Tong did the same thing. The night breeze seemed to sound the horn for the final charge. The sabers of the two generals fell at the same time, and all the cavalry prepared for the final charge at the same time. Xiu xiu xiu. Xiu xiu xiu. Right at this moment, the sound of arrows piercing through the air rang out. Then, from the periphery of the battlefield, behind the Turpan army, came a series of battle cries. The sound of horse hooves stomping on the ground reverberated into everyone's ears. The new army cavalry reinforcements had finally arrived. It was the commander of the 3rd Cavalry Division, Lei Chuandang. This irascible and loud general was also very brave. The moment he appeared behind the Turpan cavalrymen, he started killing them. A huge hole was easily torn open by him. You guys follow me to block them. The rest of you, kill these people. Kill them. At this moment, General Tong was also infuriated. 14,000 men against only half of the enemy. Yet, there was still no result after so long. This made him feel humiliated and angry at the same time. At this moment, he didn't give the order to retreat. Even if he were to die, he wanted to kill off the 5-star army that gave him a headache and made him respect them. Protect the leader. When the 50 cavalrymen heard the battle cries outside, they couldn't help but tremble. A wave of energy instantly filled their bodies. They then formed an encirclement, surrounding Wu Ba, Zhao Xing, and Commander Tong Long, whose fate was unknown. Kill. Arrow formation, charge with me. Lei Chuandang had completely forgotten that as a divisional commander, he couldn't rashly enter the battlefield. Thinking of his comrades, he brandished his massive saber and descended like a god of death. None of the Turkmen soldiers who stood in his way could withstand a single blow from him. Lei Chuandang was the tip of the arrow, and in a short period of time, he killed his way out. Coincidentally, he ran into General Tong, who was just as angry. When two kings met, there was only one person left. Without saying a word, the two of them immediately started fighting. Lei Chuandang's moves were grand and grand. His saber, which was wider than a normal saber, was wielded with vigor and vigor. General Tong, who was favored by General Daiqin, wasn't a good-for-nothing. He used his curved saber with great dexterity, always using 4 ounces of force to deflect Lei Chuandang's huge force and looking for an opportunity to counterattack. On the surface, the two of them were evenly matched, and it would be difficult to determine the victor in a short period of time. However, only General Tong himself knew how much pressure he was facing at this moment. Every time his curved saber clashed with Lei Chuandang's saber, his arm couldn't help but tremble. After a while, the area between his thumb and index finger that was holding the saber was already dripping with blood. Let go. Lei Chuandang, who was anxious to save his comrades, didn't hesitate to use his strength. Another ferocious slash, like a tiger descending the mountain, clashed with General Tong's curved saber. Just as he said, the other party's curved saber trembled and fell to the ground. Succeeding in one strike, Lei Chuandang didn't hold back and swung his saber again. General Tong, who had lost his weapon, quickly dodged and fled. If it was under normal circumstances, he might have been able to dodge. However, he was on a war horse. He dodged to the side, and the war horse didn't have the ability to do so. With one strike, the war horse fell to the ground, and General Tong also fell to the ground. Kill. Following closely behind Lei Chuandang, the cavalry of the 5-star army in the arrow formation immediately spurred their horses and walked past him. General Tong managed to dodge the first and second slash, but he didn't manage to dodge the third and fourth slash. Just as he got up from the ground, he was turned into a target by the 5-star army's cavalry. His body was cut beyond recognition, and he died with blood all over his body. Lei Chuandang didn't care whether General Tong was dead or alive. He had confidence in his comrades behind him. At this moment, his attention was completely focused on the front. He still had to save his comrades. Even if there was only a 1% chance, he had to give it his all. Charging with all his strength, a huge opening appeared in front of him. Lei Chuandang finally reached the center of the encirclement in the shortest time possible. When he arrived, he saw 6 cavalry in the uniform of the 5-star army. They were all covered in blood, and their faces looked as if they were ready to die. Good brother, I'm late. When he saw that there were only 6 cavalry, Lei Chuandang, a hot-blooded man, couldn't help but cry. Although he didn't experience it personally, he could feel how difficult and dangerous this battle was. Ha, Commander Lei, you're finally here. Wu Ba, who was riding on his horse, chuckled. It was a smile of satisfaction, a smile of relief after completing a mission. Because of this, he breathed his last breath and fell to the ground from his horse. Quick, save them. Zhao Xing, who was beside Wu Ba, immediately shouted. Following that, a group of shouts and shouts resounded in the encirclement. Lei Chuandang's appearance not only saved Wu Ba, Zhao Xing, and the others, but also defeated the remaining 4,000 Turpan cavalry. When they had the advantage in numbers, they still didn't win. Now that the reinforcements of the 5-star army had arrived and General Tong was dead, the rest of them didn't have the courage to stay here. They immediately scattered like birds and beasts, fleeing in all directions. In comparison, the main force of Turfan was not having a good time either. Commander Su he brought the entire 2nd Cavalry Division and 2 regiments of the 4th Cavalry Division. More than 10,000 cavalrymen charged into Turfan's main camp from the east like a flood of steel. General Daiqin, who was waiting for good news from the north and west, didn't expect enemies to appear from the east. For a moment, he was stunned on the spot. Isn't the eastern front guarded by Wuli Ji and 30,000 Ili cavalry? Then why would these enemies appear here? Thinking back to when the Ili cavalry asked him for help, he suddenly understood. Could it be that the request for help wasn't an act, but real? If that was the case, then where did the 5-star army get so many cavalry to be able to defeat Yi Erqiang's cavalry and the Ili cavalry? How did they have the strength to attack him? At this moment, the 5-star army became mysterious in General Daiqin's eyes. Such a result made him believe without a doubt that the main force of the 5-star army had arrived. It could even be Bugnam of Gojoseon himself. Otherwise, with the new army's 30,000 cavalry, how could they injure him to this extent? General Daiqin, who thought he understood everything, cursed each and every one of the scouts in his heart. He always thought that these scouts had the wrong information, which led to the current defeat. But he didn't know that Yang Qindong's army was still 100 miles away. To reach here, it would take at least a day. It was also because of this wrong judgment that Daiqin didn't even bother with the 5-star army that appeared in the east. Instead, he directly gave the order to retreat. Actually, he still had close to 20,000 cavalry. If he counterattacked now, it was very possible that he could defeat Su He's new army. But the shadow of his previous defeat was too big in Daiqin's heart. It was so big that he had lost the courage to fight head-on. Daiqin gave the order to retreat. He only left 5,000 cavalry to stop the 5-star army's advance. Because behind him was the Turpan capital, he needed time to retreat to inform King Hardenbarter. The king also needed time to retreat. The scout general galloped towards the capital. He did not shout as he galloped on the streets of the capital. He was worried that the news of the army's defeat would spread to the city and cause chaos in the city. This would be even more detrimental to the king's departure. In the palace, Hardenbarter already knew about the battle outside the city. He had already put on his king's clothes and was waiting for the news. He didn't expect that the news of the defeat would come. If it wasn't for the fact that the throne was wide enough, he probably would have fallen off the throne. How did we lose? Isn't Bugnam of Gojoseon still 100 miles away? Isn't there only the 5-star army outside? After calming himself down, Hardenbarter asked the question that was bothering him the most. My king, Bugnam of Gojoseon has appeared. We weren't prepared. The Yarqiang and Ili kingdom's cavalry have all retreated. General Daiqin can't do this alone. The scout told Hardenbarter what Daiqin meant. What? After hearing that his allies had retreated and that Bugnam of Gojoseon had appeared, Hardenbarter knew that he had lost again. It was a huge loss. A huge loss that would leave the capital behind. Seeing that Hardenbarter was still in a daze, the scout anxiously said, Your Majesty, General Daiqin probably won't be able to hold on for long. Please leave the capital, Your Majesty. Chapter 1225. Yes, yes, leave this place immediately, leave this place. Even though he was unwilling, Hardenbarter didn't want to be a captive. If he lost the capital, he could still take it back. However, if he was captured by the 5-star army, there would be no chance for him to make a comeback. Luckily, he was prepared. When the scouts entered the city at night, they didn't make a big fuss. When Hardenbarter left the capital, he wasn't stopped at all. However, due to the lack of time, he left a lot of good things in the palace. He was even worried that if he made a ruckus, the civilians would hear the news and come out to escape. As such, he didn't even have the courage to burn those things. Outside of Turpan city, Dai Qin and his cavalry fought as they retreated. They managed to hold on until dawn. After receiving news that the king had left the city safely, they took the remaining 20,000 cavalry and escaped. Because Dai Qin's forces were the last to be attacked, they didn't lose much. They only lost a lot when they surrounded the Liaodong cavalry regiment. In fact, at this time, the strength of the new Third Army had decreased by a lot. After a night of fighting, they had lost almost a cavalry division. Among them, Wu Ba's regiment suffered the most. Less than 400 of them survived from the loss of 2,000 men. Half of them were seriously injured and would have to withdraw from the army even if they recovered. Needless to say, the Liaodong cavalry regiment was even worse. When the casualties were counted, some of their injured brothers were dug out from the pile of corpses. Even so, less than 500 of their 5,000 brothers were left. 90% of their strength was damaged, and they were almost beaten to a pulp. Of course, after paying such a huge price, it wasn't like they didn't gain anything. On the contrary, they gained a lot. The most direct result was that they took down Turpan city. Occupying this place meant that they had the foundation and strength to rule everywhere. Secondly, there were many good things in the palace that had been taken by the 5-star army for their own use. Their initial estimated value was around 5 million taels of silver, which was enough to make up for all the losses of the 5-star army in this battle. Not to mention, most of the civilians in the city were also trapped by the 5-star army. When they woke up, they were still Turkmen, but when they woke up, they were already captives of the Baiming army. After a bitter battle, they managed to capture over 20,000 people and tens of thousands of war horses. Among them were the 5,000 war horses that Dai Qin had given to Wu Liji under pressure. Because Wu Liji was in a hurry to escape, they were all captured by the 5-star army. With less than 40,000 cavalrymen, they managed to defeat 100,000 cavalrymen of the Alliance army. This was no small miracle. When Yang Qindong received the battle report on his way here, he couldn't help but smile. Very good, the new army is good, the Liaodong cavalry is even better. Men, tell everyone to hurry up and get to Turpan as soon as possible. This was not because Yang Qindong wanted to see the fruits of victory earlier. He was worried that once the three allied forces found that their opponents were less than 40,000 people after daybreak, and the number of people after a hard battle was only more than 20,000, they would suddenly counterattack. If so, everything they had obtained before was likely to be lost. Yang Qindong's worry wasn't without reason. For example, a Leifu of the Yarqiang kingdom also had such thoughts. He even sent people to contact Dai Qin and Wu Liji to discuss whether or not they should attack during the day when the 5-star army wasn't stable yet. However, he was mercilessly rejected. Last night, as the first Yarqiang tribe to be attacked, a Leifu of the Yarqiang tribe did feel like he was beaten senseless. Especially after the death of his deputy general, when the morale of the army fell to the lowest point, he immediately made preparations to escape. After running for dozens of li and confirming that there were no pursuers behind him, Aleifu smelled a trace of abnormality. Logically speaking, he had already lost. If it was him, he would definitely bring his troops and attack. There was no reason for him to let them go. However, the 5-star army didn't chase after him. What did this mean? There were only two answers. First, the 5-star army didn't place him in their eyes. Second, the 5-star army's strength was insufficient and they couldn't chase after him. As for the first answer, if the 5-star army didn't place the 30,000 cavalry in their eyes, he wouldn't believe it no matter what. Then it seemed that there was only the second answer. For this reason, he hurriedly sent out close to 100 scouts to gather information. Very quickly, the news came back. The 5-star army's strength was indeed insufficient and they were surrounded by the Turpan cavalry. When he heard this news, Alefu had an impulse to lead his troops back and deal a heavy blow to the 5-star corps that was looking for trouble with him. He wanted to let them know how stupid it was to provoke him. However, this thought was fleeting. He was thinking of another problem. Once the 5-star army was defeated, the Yarqiang tribe's greatest enemy would be the Turpan kingdom. Since there was such an opportunity, why not sit back and watch the tigers and dragons fight while he reaped the benefits? Due to his selfishness, Alefu only ordered people to pay close attention to the situation on the battlefield. He himself walked at a steady pace. He wanted to wait for both sides to consume more of their strength. Then, he would appear as the savior and turn the tide. However, Alefu didn't expect that Wuli Ji would also be defeated. When he heard from the scouts that the 5-star army had defeated the Yilabali army and launched a fierce attack on the Turpan cavalry, he hurriedly fled. Using a saying from the future, it wasn't that he was useless, but that the opponent was too cunning and too strong. However, no matter what, Alefu's 30,000 troops didn't suffer any heavy losses. Even last night, he only lost a deputy general and less than 1,000 cavalry. Furthermore, those cavalry were mostly injured from trampling on each other. This meant that out of the 3 armies, Alefu was the strongest. It was precisely because of this that he made the request to counterattack. Because from all the signs, it seemed like the 5-star army wasn't that strong. When they could fight, they didn't fight. When they couldn't fight, Alefu wanted to fight. Facing this request, Daiqin directly rejected it. As for Wuli Ji, sorry, he had escaped to God knows where last night. Without any helpers, Alefu decided to leave after an intense mental struggle. He didn't want to take the risk. More importantly, this risk wasn't worth it at all. If he really defeated the 5-star army and took back the Turpan capital, what could he do? Now was the time for the 3 armies to form an alliance. Could he still occupy their capital and not return it? In the end, Alefu could only return. This made General Su He, who had been watching them from the city tower, let out a sigh of relief. They had just taken over the city. Now, the city was still very chaotic, and there were even many opposing forces. One had to say that Turpan's foundation was still very strong. Especially those retired soldiers. They didn't die and were mixed in with the civilians. For such experienced veterans, once they were given weapons and had a leader, they would quickly become a very strong force and pose a threat to the 5-star army. With internal problems, He didn't want to have any more conflicts with the Yarqiang army. After seeing Alefu retreat, He let out a sigh of relief. At the same time, he said to his 4 division commanders, "Clean up the city, kill those who oppose. Try some of the prisoners, punish those who are guilty and release those who are innocent. Spread the news of the 5-star army publicly, dividing the land to stabilize the morale of the army. Educate the prisoners, if they have relatives in the city, make use of them and try to make them work for us. Calculate the resources obtained from the war, unify them and look after them strictly. Clean up the palace and prepare for the arrival of the king." A series of orders were given out by Su He. The machine that was the new army started to operate quickly. Everyone was 100% focused. Even though many people were tired after fighting for a night, when they thought about the arrival of Bugnam of Gojoseon, they were full of energy again. A day later, the scouts and light cavalry of the new army arrived at Turpan. Su He, who had been worried about a counterattack, was relieved. On the morning of the 3rd day, Yang Qindong brought 20,000 Mongolian soldiers and the Far Eastern Army's 1st Cavalry Division to Turpan. After more than a day of preparations, the security situation in the city had become much more stable. After a series of orders were issued, especially after the public policy of distributing land was implemented, the Turpan people who were originally worried about not having enough food to eat and clothes to wear in the future were much calmer. As a result, more than 3,000 people came to inquire about the situation. Perhaps they wanted to ask about it themselves, or perhaps it was their friends and neighbors who wanted to ask about it. For these people's questions, He specially sent people to set up a temporary problem-solving department to be responsible for answering their questions. When Yang Qindong entered Turpan City under the protection of 2,000 majestic Black Rider dragon guards, he saw that not only was the order in the city not chaotic, but there were even some commoners lining the streets to welcome him. Shock flashed through his heart. "Commander Su, don't tell me you spent money to invite all these people?" Looking at the people standing on both sides of the road, old and young, who were paying attention to him, Yang Qindong asked Military Commander Su He, who guided him into the city with a straight face. At that moment, Su He's face turned ugly. His gaze was a little evasive as he stammered, "Some of them came on their own accord, some were invited by your subordinates." Chapter 12:26. Well, at least you're honest. But don't do this kind of thing in the future. You've been with me for a long time, so you know I'm not a person who likes to pretend. I believe that if we really make these people live better and more peaceful than before, they will sincerely welcome us one day. Yang Qindong didn't blame Su He for this matter, but it was necessary to remind him. As the saying goes, subordinates follow the example of their superiors. Once he started the trend, the people below him would definitely follow suit. Not only would it be easy to corrupt the social atmosphere, but it would also be a huge waste of manpower and resources. Yes, seeing that Yang Qindong wasn't really angry, Su He felt relieved. After testing the bottom line, Su He wouldn't do this kind of trend in the future. Okay, let's talk about the situation in the city. To be honest, this battle was really risky. Try not to do this in the future. Although some things were reported in the telegram, it wasn't as clear as seeing it in person. Yang Qindong was also anxious to understand the current situation in the city. At least he wanted to know how much combat power the new army and Liaodong cavalry strengthening regiment had left, and whether they could continue to attack in a short period of time. Su He had already expected that Yang Qindong would ask, so he already knew the relevant data. This time, it was easy for him to speak. "Sixth young master, the situation is like this," Su He spoke while Yang Qindong listened carefully. When the army arrived in front of the palace, they just happened to talk about the Liaodong cavalry strengthening regiment's commander Tong Long fainted because of exhaustion. After hearing this, Yang Qindong didn't even rush to the palace. He let Su He lead the way and went straight to the nearby temporary military hospital. In the temporary military hospital, there were a lot of wounded people in this battle, and there were even a lot of wounded captives. And in the middle of it, there was an independent tent. In a temporary military hospital where there were not enough beds and tents, being able to enjoy the treatment of a single room was not something an ordinary person could do. Not to mention, the 5-star army had always been particular about equality between officers and soldiers. Very few people were able to enjoy single rooms. However, there was still one person who enjoyed such treatment under the special permission of Commander Su He. He was Tong Long, the commander of the Liaodong cavalry regiment. In this battle, the 5,000 men of the reinforced regiment had managed to attract and drive off 40,000 cavalry. It was also because of their sacrifice that they were able to achieve such a great victory in Turpan City. Not only did they capture countless prisoners, but they also gained a lot of money and rations. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the reinforced regiment had achieved the greatest merit this time. As the commander of the troops, Tong Long had killed countless people until he fell off his horse. It could be said that this battle had shown his might and prestige. It was not an exaggeration to say that his name could be described as having outstanding military achievements. After a day of rest, Tong Long had recovered a lot of strength. Not only could he eat by himself, but he could also get out of bed and walk. If it wasn't for the strong request of the military doctor, he probably would have returned to the army. When talking about the army, the two people lying on the bed and sitting on the side who came to take care of him were both silent. This battle was indeed a victory, and the Liaodong cavalry regiment had achieved a great merit because of it. However, the losses were also huge. Out of the 5,000 cavalry, only 500 survived. Among them, 200 were too heavily injured and would probably not be able to fight on horseback in the future. With such a huge loss, Tong Long and Zhao Xing in the single room didn't know how to face it. They didn't know what to say. Logically speaking, when the army had fought to this extent, even if they were to immediately disband, no one would say anything. If they couldn't even gather enough people to form a normal battalion, how could they talk about a reinforced regiment or an independent army? Vice Commander Zhao, do you think our reinforced regiment will be disbanded because of this? Lying on the bed and frowning, Tong Long had a glimmer of hope, but at the same time, he was also worried. When Zhao Xing, who came to take care of him, heard this, he first raised his head, then shook his head. Commander, don't think about these things. This time, no matter how you look at it, we did a great job, so we shouldn't be disbanded. Ha! Zhao Xing's answer clearly didn't dispel Tong Long's doubts. He smiled bitterly and said, "You already said it, so it shouldn't be. It seems like there's a high chance that we'll be disbanded. But that's also true. We're a surrendered army. When they agreed to let us form our own regiment, it was probably because they considered that we wouldn't be able to adapt. It was also to show others. Now, our soldiers are all gone, so we can openly disband. But this way, I'm afraid we'll have to be separated. To be honest, Vice Commander Zhao, the feeling of commanding an army with you is really great. I really like it. I'm also willing to work under you." Zhao Xing raised his head. He wanted to say something, but in the end, he closed his mouth. Regardless of whether it was him or Tong Long, they didn't have any foundation in the 5-star army. If they had to be connected, it would be that they were friends with Bai Shuang, the commander of the 4th Regiment of the 1st Cavalry Division. But distant water couldn't quench a present thirst. Furthermore, he was only a regiment commander. Although he was in the world's #1 cavalry division and his regiment was more valuable, he was still far away from them. Even if he was right in front of them, would he be willing to speak up for them? They didn't have any connections with the higher-ups. If this happened in Baiming, needless to say, their reinforced regiment would definitely be disbanded. Perhaps they would give them another position because of their contributions, but needless to say, it wouldn't be as important and independent as before. After all, a surrendered general was a surrendered general. Today, the 5-star army surrendered. Who knew if other people would surrender tomorrow? In the ward, there was a period of silence. After some time, Zhao Xing finally couldn't help but ask, "Commander, tell me the truth, do you regret it? This time, we've sacrificed our entire reinforced team just for this victory." I don't regret it." Before Zhao Xing could finish, Tong Long had already opened his mouth. "There are things a man can do, and there are things he can't do. Since you sincerely chose the 5-star army, of course, you have to perform well. But do you regret it?" Of course I don't regret it. If it wasn't for Bugnam of Gojoseon's favor, I might just be a normal soldier now, or I might have been sent to farm. Now that I can follow you and lead the army to victory, it's worth it. Good, no regrets, good, worth it." Just as Zhao Xing finished speaking and expressed his stance, the curtain of the ward was pulled open from the outside. Then, a tall and sturdy figure appeared in front of the two of them. Due to the lack of light, both Tong Long and Zhao Xing couldn't see who it was. However, when they gradually got used to it and saw who it was, their expressions changed drastically. Tong Long didn't care about anything else. He immediately jumped off the bed and shouted together with Zhao Xing, who was already kneeling on the ground. "Your subordinate greets Bugnam of Gojoseon. Long live Bugnam of Gojoseon. Get up." When Yang Qindong saw Tong Long get off the bed and kneel on the ground, he quickly got up and helped him up. This scene made Tong Long extremely touched. After all, the person who helped him was the soul of the 5-star army. At the same time, he was Bugnam of Gojoseon, who was personally conferred the title by the great Ming dynasty's emperor. Thank you, Bugnam of Gojoseon. But how could your subordinate have made you personally come?" Tong Long's voice was slightly choked as he spoke. Unlike others, he was someone who had once studied in the capital of Baiming. It was because of this that he was very familiar with status and rank. Thinking back to when he was in the capital of Baiming, any 3rd or 4th rank civil official wouldn't put him in their eyes. Even if he sent money to them, they wouldn't even be able to meet the person in question. But now, he was only slightly injured, and Bugnam of Gojoseon had actually made an appearance. "Ai, are your injuries okay?" Yang Qindong personally helped Tong Long back to the bed. This action made it difficult for him to stand or sit. But before he could say anything, Yang Qindong's laughter rang out. "How can you say that he's worthy? In this battle, you fought well with the new army. Especially your Liaodong cavalry regiment. You only had 5,000 men and horses, but you dared to fight and charge. You didn't show the slightest bit of fear in the face of an enemy several times your size. On the contrary, you killed them until their men and horses fell. Good, very good. Thank you, Bugnam of Gojoseon." Hearing this praise, Tong Long and Zhao Xing hurriedly knelt to express their gratitude. "All right, there's no need to keep kneeling. We don't do this here. Right, in the future, you can call me King, or you can call me the sixth young master. There's no need to call me Bugnam of Gojoseon. That would make us seem distant." Yang Qindong said with a chuckle. The people below had many different names for Yang Qindong. Those who were closest to him, such as Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei, naturally called him the young master. Those who were closer, such as some of the senior officials, called Yang Qindong the sixth young master. Those who were further away were allowed to call him king. Only the most ordinary people called Yang Qindong the Bugnam of Gojoseon. In other words, from the way they addressed Yang Qindong, one could tell whether they were close or not. This time, Yang Qindong allowed the two to call him king. This was a sign of closeness. "Yes, king." Tong Long and Zhao Xing's faces flashed with joy, and they immediately changed the way they addressed him. "Ha, that's right. Right, I heard that the two of you are injured. How are you? Are you in any trouble?" Yang Qindong asked with a sincere expression of concern. "We're fine. We can now take our swords and mount our horses to kill the enemy." This time, the two of them spoke in unison. "Good, as expected of the Tiger General of the 5-star Army. Since that's the case, the two of you listen to my orders." Yang Qindong saw that the two of them did not seem to be in any trouble. He was relieved and immediately shouted loudly. The two of them were stunned by Yang Qindong's shout. Out of instinct, the two of them straightened their bodies and replied in unison. "Your subordinates are here." Chapter 12:27. Yang Qindong's gaze swept across the two of them, before he said, "In view of the outstanding performance of the Liaodong Cavalry Regiment in the attack on Tuliefan City, they will be awarded a first-class merit. The soldiers who died will be compensated, and the soldiers who are still alive will be given jobs. The rest will be promoted by 3 ranks. Regiment Commander Tong Long and Deputy Regiment Commander Zhao Xing have performed valiantly, and will be promoted to Liaodong Cavalry Division. They will be allowed to lead 10,000 soldiers, and will be independent of the other armies. Once the order is given, they will be given priority to choose from the captives, and will rebuild the army's prestige." Yang Qindong's voice reverberated throughout the room, causing Tong Long and Zhao Xing's eyes to light up. When they heard that they could rebuild the army, and change from a regiment to a division, the two of them were excited. After the order was given, the two of them immediately knelt on the ground and said in unison, "Yes, Your Majesty." This time, all the soldiers will be given priority to be recruited from the captives of the battle. As for the regiment commander, I will make the arrangements for you. There is only one request, and that is to form the army as soon as possible. There will be a big battle ahead." Yang Qindong looked at the two of them, his eyes filled with hope as he spoke. "Yes, Your Majesty, don't worry. We will not let you down. Please watch our performance." At this time, both Tong Long and Zhao Xing were extremely excited. They had thought that they would lose their positions, and would be suppressed. However, they did not expect that in the face of military merits, Yang Qindong would treat everyone equally. This time, they were confident. In the future, when they encountered a tough battle, they would know how to perform better. This was also Yang Qindong's goal. As his power grew, his territory grew, and his army grew. he did not have enough people in his hands. This meant that he needed to rope in some of the people who were previously enemies, but were knowledgeable, to work for him. However, a surrendered general was still a surrendered general. No matter how sincere he was, it was inevitable that some people would have doubts. This time, he had used the opportunity of Tong Long and Zhao Xing's great victory to increase the rewards. He wanted to show everyone that as long as they had the ability, as long as they made great contributions, they would receive the same treatment as everyone else and be rewarded as well. As for Tong Long and Zhao Xing, after receiving the order to rebuild the Liaodong Cavalry Division, their injuries seemed to have mostly healed, and they immediately began to prepare. The two of them were originally talented, and what they lacked was an opportunity to display their talents. This time, not only Tong Long's Liaodong Cavalry Division, but Su He's new army also began to prepare their replacements. After the battle, they had lost almost an entire division, and needed to replenish their numbers. Yang Qindong had fully considered this problem, and immediately said that if there were not enough people among the captives, they could recruit soldiers from Turpan City. He had long heard reports from intelligence personnel that Turpan had dismissed some of the experienced soldiers to return home to farm. This was originally a manifestation of hiding soldiers among the people, and now it was convenient for Yang Qindong. If there were not enough soldiers, the first batch of 100,000 soldiers from Shaowei province would arrive. At that time, there would be suitable people to choose from among them. However, because of this, Yang Qindong had no choice but to stop attacking. Just Turpan City alone had 200,000 people, and it was truly worthy of being the capital of a country. It would also take time to move all these people out and replace them with people from other areas. Fortunately, when Su He told all of the people in the city that he would not change his promise of giving them land, and on the contrary, there would be more land in other places, the voices of the people became much quieter. It was not enough to just give carrots. Su He followed Yang Qindong's instructions and picked up a big stick with the other hand. The general idea was that if anyone didn't want to leave, once the war started, not only his property could not be guaranteed, but also his life could be lost at any time. As ordinary people, no one was willing to live in the chaos of war. With this big stick raised high in the air, the few remaining voices of opposition quickly disappeared. Now, they only needed to wait for the first batch of 100,000 soldiers from the Japanese Empire and 200,000 people from other regions to arrive. Then, they would be able to gain a firm foothold in Turpan City and start conquering the entire Ili province. In front of Turpan City. Every day, countless people of various races could be seen passing by. On both sides of them, there would always be many soldiers protecting them. On the city gate tower, Marquis Wukinghao Shiheng's brows were tightly knitted together. His heart was like a stormy sea rolling over and over. Once upon a time, Shiheng had looked down on Yang Qindong. It was just that he had a good background and had become the favorite of the emperor because he had given a potato to the emperor. He had also looked down on him because he was a business genius who knew how to make money. But no matter what his identity was, in the eyes of a general like Shiheng, he was just a weak young master who only knew how to talk. If he wanted to, he could trample such a person to death at any time. But suddenly, the Tumu Fortress incident had put Yang Qindong at the heart of the struggle. Then, there was the Battle of the Capital, and Yang Qindong had completely shone, becoming known as the War God. From then on, when Shiheng looked at Yang Qindong, there was not only jealousy and envy in his eyes, but also a trace of fear. Until now, Yang Qindong had become the Bugnam of Gojoseon. Although he had made progress, he was just a Marquis Wukinghao. More importantly, he had already broken away from the shackles of the great Ming dynasty and become the king of a region. But now, he was just a commander-in-chief who had to Biming the emperor. The difference between the two was so great that although Shiheng was unwilling, there was nothing he could do. After all, the gap was so big that he had no way to surpass him. When the Battle of Origin City began, Shiheng thought that the opportunity had come, but he did not expect that he would fail at the last step. Now, he was forced to retreat to Tulu City and watch Yang Qindong soar to the ninth heaven. The gap was getting bigger and bigger, and Shiheng's resentment in his heart was getting deeper and deeper. Now, he just wanted to have a chance to defeat the five-star army and prove that he was the best general in the great Ming dynasty. This pride made him like a ball of fire, which had been tormenting him for a period of time. If it were not for the shortage of food and fodder and the fact that the reinforcements had not yet arrived, he was afraid that he would have sent the troops after Yang Qindong left Tulu city. This wait lasted for more than 2 months. Finally, news came from the imperial court that the new rations had been delivered and the new soldiers were being assembled. Just as everything was about to be ready, he saw the Northern Ming Army's Great Migration Project, or rather, the Great Movement. Every day, he did not know how many people and soldiers walked through the gate of Tulu city. 1 day, 2 days. It had been like this every day for more than half a month, and there was still no sign of it stopping. Shi Heng's fire was also constantly cooling down. Until now, cold sweat had begun to appear on his forehead. How many days has it been? Shi Heng, who was standing on the city tower, asked with a trembling voice. Marquis, it's the 22nd day, General Zhou Qing, who was at the side, answered the question with a serious face. 22 days, 22 days. Shi Heng's face turned uglier as he muttered the number silently. If there were only 10,000 people passing by each day, that would be more than 200,000. Not to mention, it was far from ending. He really didn't know where Yang Qindong had gotten so many civilians and soldiers, and what exactly were they preparing to do. The moment the five-star army bared their fangs, Shi Heng suddenly had an idea of invincibility. He did not even dare to think about it. If the target of these soldiers and civilians was Tulu city, would he still be able to defend it? Or rather, how long would he be able to defend it? Just as Shi Heng's face was filled with thoughts, another group of cavalry and infantry walked through Tulu city with a bright five-star flag. They seemed to be intentionally demonstrating their power. Coincidentally, Shi Heng caught sight of them as they passed by the city walls. Is that ancient river? When Shi Heng looked up, he saw a handsome general in armor walking less than a mile away from the city. Seeing that figure, Shi Heng's squinted eyes suddenly widened. Yes. I think so. Zhou Qing recognized the person at a glance. It was General Ancient River, a former member of the 10,000 prefectures. As a former colleague, he couldn't be more familiar with him. But when he noticed Shi Heng's tone, he quickly changed his words and spoke in an uncertain manner. He doesn't look like he is Ancient River. Didn't he already surrender to the five-star army? What is he doing here? When Shi Heng saw that Gu He, who was riding a warhorse, was approaching the city gate tower, he involuntarily took half a step back even though he was standing on the city gate tower. He spoke with an anxious expression in his eyes. The person below the city was indeed Ancient River. But he was no longer Baiming's 10,000 prefectures general, but he was now the commander of the five-star army's new 1st Cavalry Division. The order was issued half a month ago by Yang Qindong himself. The new 5 armies were established. After the new 1st Army, the new 2nd Army, and the new army, the new 5 armies were established. Moreover, it was the former commander of Baiming's 10,000 prefectures general, Shi Wanshan. When this news came out, many people's jaws dropped. It was also because of Shi Wanshan's sudden promotion that it attracted a lot of speculation. On the contrary, no one cared about why the new 4th Army didn't exist. They didn't know the plot in Yang Qindong's heart. He wouldn't allow anyone to steal the name of the new 4th Army, not even himself. The five-star army's expansion and the establishment of a new army were no longer a secret. For the new commander position, many people were secretly moving around. Some of them wanted to command more troops and earn more merits. Some of them were selfish and wanted to be in a high position with more power. They could always do more things that benefited themselves. Chapter 12:28. For this reason, Yu Mian, the vice-commander of the army headquarters, Ling Song, and even the vice-commander of the navy headquarters, Gao Xiong, had interceded through various channels. However, no one would have thought that this position would fall on the head of Shi Wanshan, who had just surrendered and had not made any contributions. When the new army commander, tiger's mane, represented Yang Qindong and announced this order in front of the officers of Shi City. Even Shi Wanshan himself was stunned. Although he had been in charge of an army of more than 100,000 people when he was in Beiming, he could be considered to have the experience and qualifications to control an army. However, this was the 5-star army. As a general who had just surrendered, it was better not to talk about his qualifications. Actually, it wasn't that Shi Wanshan hadn't heard about the establishment of the new 5 armies, but whether it was himself, his old subordinates Gu He and Ning Wenfeng, none of them thought about it. In their eyes, this was something that had nothing to do with them. With their current status, they would be thankful if they could be elected as one of the division commanders. It was not impossible for them to be appointed as a regiment commander. All of this was the analysis of Ning Wenfeng, who was known as the smartest of the 3. In his words, before surrendering, Shi Wanshan had said that he did not want to fight with Beiming. After all, he had come from there. Yang Qindong had also agreed to this matter in the telegram. Now that the new 5 armies were going to fight in Yili, it was very likely that they would be incorporated into it. If this was the case, whether it was as a division commander or a regiment commander, they would still have military power in their hands and could fully show their talent. They were afraid that they would be assigned a deputy position. If that was the case, there would be a main position above them, and it would be difficult to realize even if they had ideas. That would be the most uncomfortable thing. It was precisely because the hope was very low, or even that there was no hope. When the pie fell from the sky, Shi Wanshan's eyes were dazzled and his face was full of disbelief. As for Shi Wanshan's reaction, Tiger's mane could empathize with him, but he didn't expect it either. However, since this was an order from the young master, he would definitely carry it out unconditionally. Therefore, he only glanced at the petrified Shi Wanshan and continued to read out the order. Order: Ancient River is the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division of the new 5 armies, Li Yu is the commander of the 2nd Cavalry Division, and Meng Chao is the commander of the 3rd Cavalry Division. Each division has 4 regiments, each regiment has 2,000 soldiers, and each regiment has 400 soldiers. Each regiment has 8,400 soldiers. At this point, Ancient River and the other 2 were also excited. They never thought that they would actually become a division commander. That meant that they could command close to 10,000 cavalrymen. However, no one noticed that one of the officers was clenching his fists, revealing the nervousness and unwillingness in his heart. This person was none other than Ning Wenfeng, the former head of Beiming's Wanquan Duxi. In the Wanquan Duxi, Shi Wanshan was in charge of the overall situation. His breadth of mind also allowed him to have talent in this area. In terms of martial prowess, Ancient River was naturally the most outstanding. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was a fierce general. However, when it came to the smartest person, the one who could understand the intentions of the higher-ups the most was definitely Ning Wenfeng. Most of the time, this Ning Wenfeng acted as Shi Wanshan's military advisor. This time's appointment was already beyond his expectations. Shi Wanshan was actually the commander of an army, and Ancient River was the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division. However, he wasn't included in the order. Could it be that Bugnam of Gojoseon wanted to separate the 3 of them and not let them work together? But if that was the case, why did he give out the positions of commander and commander? He couldn't figure it out, Ning Wenfeng shook his head and his face was a little pale. He was thinking that as the positions changed in the future, he was afraid that the gap between him and Shi Wanshan and Ancient River would become bigger and bigger. After a long time, the relationship between the brothers would not be the same as before. Just as Ning Wenfeng lowered his head and thought about this, Lieutenant General Tiger's man, who was standing on the stage, announced that after the Battle of the First City, Yang Qindong was promoted to Lieutenant General. Not only that, but Leng Song and Gao Xiong were also promoted from Major General to Lieutenant General. Leng Feng's Army and Navy Division commanders were also promoted from Senior Colonel to Major General. The only difference was that the commander of the new 2nd Army, the commander of the new army, Su He, and the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Tian Hu, were still Major General. Yang Qindong wanted to use this method to tell the world that the Tiger's man of the new army was different from ordinary commanders. He was the leader of all commanders. He opened his mouth and said, Ning Wenfeng is the commander of the infantry division of the new 5th Army, 4th Division, with a total of 15,000 soldiers. Wow! There was an uproar. A commander could command 15,000 soldiers. Except for the earliest Mo Bay division, it seemed that not many people could enjoy this kind of treatment. But now, Ning Wenfeng had such achievements without doing anything. What kind of person was he? For a time, many people's eyes searched the crowd. At this time, Ning Wenfeng did not hear this at all. He was still entangled in Yang Qindong's purpose. He believed that his ability was not worse than anyone. It was just that his previous superior was Shi Wanshan, his own big brother, so he was embarrassed to take the credit. Since it was to measure talent, why didn't Bugnam of Gojoseon see his talent? Was it because he was too low-key? Ning Wenfeng, who was still thinking, did not know that Tiger's man had just announced his new appointment. He also did not know how many people were envious of him at this time. It was not until a burning gaze fell on him that he woke up from a dream. Then, Ancient River, who was beside him, gently nudged him. Hurry up and thank him with us. Before he could figure out what was going on, Ning Wenfeng was gently pulled out of the group by Ancient River. Then, they all gave a military salute that was not very standard. Ning Wenfeng, who had already walked out of the group, was still a little confused. He still did not understand why he stood out. Until Tiger's man on the stage said again, everyone is a talent personally appointed by Bugnam of Gojoseon. I hope you will not let down this expectation. Also, considering that the new 5 armies have just arrived and have not made any achievements, our ranks are lower. Among them, Commander Shi Wanshan will be a senior colonel, and the other 4 division commanders will be colonels. I hope that the next time we meet, you will be promoted to major general and senior colonel like the other armies. After saying this, Hu Mang looked expectantly at the 5 people who had stepped forward. In fact, how could he not want to contribute his troops and give it his all? How could he not want to fight on the battlefield and establish meritorious service? But who asked him to be Yang Qindong's most trusted person? He wanted to stay in the first city and build it like an iron bucket. Okay, you can go and prepare. The soldiers can be selected from the Han army, the Mongol tribe, and the small Japanese army that has just arrived. The preparation time is half a month, and then we will send them to the inner area. After saying this, Tiger's man waved his hand. Immediately, the dust settled on the high-ranking officials of the new 5 armies. This decision was completely out of everyone's expectations. The sudden appearance did indeed catch some people off guard. However, this order was personally issued by Yang Qindong. It was said that he only reported it to the army headquarters before announcing it. Even Ling Song, the deputy commander, did not have any chance to intervene. This was enough to prove Yang Qindong's expectations for the new 5 armies. When the meeting was over, Tiger's man left first. The other officers took the opportunity to congratulate Shi Wanshan and the others. No matter what, it was not a bad thing to be on good terms with a commander. Ning Wenfeng, who was in the crowd, was still confused. Facing the congratulations of several officers who he did not even know the names of, he only smiled and cupped his hands. When the people around him gradually decreased, Ancient River gently pulled him, then said with a smile, "What's wrong, Commander Ning? Are you not happy to be in command of 15,000 infantrymen? Why don't we change it?" "What? Command 15,000 infantrymen? What's going on?" Ning Wenfeng was completely confused. His face was full of doubts and puzzlement. He didn't know that Ning Wenfeng had been distracted. He only thought that Ning Wenfeng was sick and wasn't feeling well. He reached out and touched Ning Wenfeng's forehead. Feeling that it wasn't hot, he said, "What's wrong? Didn't you hear when Commander Tiger announced the order just now? You are now the infantry division commander of the new 5 armies, 4th Division." "What? My division commander?" Ning Wenfeng exclaimed and pointed at himself. This scene was also seen by the other officers who were walking at the back, but they all smiled and shook their heads. They did not care. Obviously, if they were suddenly appointed as division commanders, their situation would not be much better. Seeing Ning Wenfeng making a fuss about nothing, Ancient River nodded. Yes, it was just announced in front of everyone. How can it be fake? I say, what are you thinking? Didn't you hear it just now? Faced with Gu He's question, Ning Wenfeng already didn't care at all. When he found out that he also held the position of a division commander, moreover, he was the infantry division commander of 15,000 men, at this moment, he only felt deep self-blame. What did he mean by Yang Qindong did not have the insight and could not see through people? In the end, he measured the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain. After a while, Ning Wenfeng finally reacted. Then, he looked around and did not see Shi Wanshan's figure. He could not help but ask, where's Big Brother? Oh, Big Brother went to see the other two division commanders. You also know that a person who becomes a division commander will naturally be busier. Ancient River said with a matter-of-fact expression. This order shattered a lot of hope, but at the same time, it also gave a lot of people hope. In the past, it was always said that the 5-star army did not care about seniority and only looked at ability. Some people believed these words, but some people did not. However, with the matter of the new 5 armies, they had no choice but to believe it. Not long after, a new order was spread throughout the army. Commander Tong Long, who was also a fallen general of Liaodong, was promoted to division commander after making a great contribution. With the two things that happened before and after, at this moment, no one doubted the fairness of the ability. Chapter 1229. And now, Ancient River appeared alone in front of Tulu's city to demonstrate his power. Previously, he had suffered a lot of grievances in the Baiming army, especially under Shi Heng's command. Now that he was a dragon in the sky, of course, he had to get rid of this mess and let the Baiming army know that he, Ancient River, was a talent that even Bugnam of Gojoseon had his eyes on. Of course, due to the distance, Ancient River did not know that Shi Heng was on the city tower at this time. Otherwise, he would have walked up and shouted a few words even if he was in danger of being shot by arrows. Therefore, he just wore a divisional-level white cloak and walked in a big circle in front of the city. Then, he quickly rode his horse and rushed straight to his 1st Cavalry Division. White cloak. Divisional General. How long has it been since Ancient River left? He has already been entrusted with an important position. On the city tower, some young generals who had long understood the officer ranks of the 5-star army sighed. Among these sighs, there was a lot of jealousy, hatred, and of course, envy. Among them, there were many knowledgeable people who thought in their hearts. If they also went to the 5-star army, what would it be like now? Didn't they see that Ancient River, who could not survive in Baiming, was now a divisional general? Of course, these envious people definitely did not include Shi Heng. After he recognized Ancient River, he snorted coldly and then asked General Zhou Qing, who was standing beside him, have you found out how many troops there are in the first city now? I don't have the detailed number, but I have the approximate number. When Zhou Qing answered this sentence, there was an obvious pause. When one looked carefully, there was a trace of panic on his face. Shi Heng, who was filled with hatred in his heart, did not pay attention to this. He only wanted to know the situation of the 5-star army in the first city. In his opinion, although they did not succeed in besieging the first city a while ago, they still severely injured their opponents. Now, their strength should be weaker. Well, about how many people are there? About. Zhou Qing was a little hesitant and did not answer immediately. What? Is it difficult to answer? Shi Heng finally noticed the change in Zhou Qing. This shout also attracted the attention of some people nearby. Tell me, how many troops do you have? I want to know. Shi Heng didn't care so much. He had long been used to everyone's attention. At this moment, there was a smile on his face. He wanted to take this opportunity to let everyone know about the situation in the beginning city. This way, he could increase his confidence. Zhou Qing also noticed the gazes of the people around him. At this moment, he didn't want to say anything. However, he did not expect Shi Heng to be angry. There was a hint of anger in Shi Heng's eyes. Hence, he decided not to think too much about it. After all, Zhou Qing was the one who forced him to say it. After that, Zhou Qing replied straightforwardly, reporting to Marquis. According to our scouts' investigation, there are about 700,000 people from the 5-star army in Origin City. A mere 7, what? How many did you say? At this moment, Shi Heng finally came to his senses. He stared at Zhou Qing with his eyes wide open. 700,000 people, but not all of them are troops. There are also some civilians. Zhou Qing knew that this would be the result, but what could he do? You forced me to say it. Hearing that there were quite a number of civilians, Shi Heng suppressed the fear and anger in his heart and asked again, how many troops do I mean? You don't have to use the number of civilians to deceive me. Yes, there are about 300,000 soldiers. This time, Zhou Qing finally gave a definite answer. 300,000, this number made Shi Heng's body tremble. He then forced himself to stand firm. There was a trace of blood in his eyes at this moment. He was speechless for a long time. He originally thought that after more than a year of siege in the beginning city, the strength there would be greatly reduced. Once Baiming's reinforcements and provisions appeared, it would be time for him to launch a large-scale counterattack. He never expected that the number of the enemy's troops would increase instead of decreasing. How did this trick work? How could he bear this result? Then, whether it was Zhou Qing or Shi Heng, what was even more unexpected was that this number would continue to expand as time passed. It was not because of anything else, but because Shaowei province had a population of 8 million. Among them, more than 600,000 soldiers were captured by the 5-star army. Under the encouragement of the 5-star army policy, more young people from Shaowei province volunteered to join the army. According to Yang Qindong's plan, Shaowei province could recruit at least 400,000 soldiers. In total, there would be 1 million soldiers. At least half of them would be transferred to the grassland. One could imagine how huge this number was. In comparison, the 700,000 soldiers now were just the beginning. When Yang Qindong left Shaowei province, he had already made his next goal clear. That was to unify the grassland and then expand to the west and northeast respectively. For example, taking down Ili was just a part of the plan to go west. These were only the plans of the army. The navy would also go out of the South China Sea and attack the Indian Ocean. Then, they would attack Africa, the North and South continents, and North America. He wanted to take advantage of the fact that there was no obvious world structure to conquer the world. If he wanted to accomplish this feat, he naturally needed enough soldiers. Not only Shaowei province, but all the countries under Yang Xie's control began to mobilize. More and more young people from other races joined the ranks of the 5-star army. In the future, the number of soldiers in the 5-star army would only increase. Shi Heng naturally did not know about all of this. Even if he was beaten to death, he would not have thought of all of this. This was the result of limited vision. In the eyes of people like him, the great Ming dynasty was already the sky. Whoever could unify the north and south of the great Ming dynasty would be a hero. As for the world, the great Ming dynasty and its surrounding countries should be the world. Shi Heng walked down the city tower silently. At this moment, he felt a chill in his heart. At the same time, he decided to immediately report the situation to the acting emperor. Previously, he had boasted that as long as the provisions were in place and 200,000 new recruits were given, he would be able to take down the first city and regain control of the grassland. Now, it seemed that this was far from enough. At this moment, the logistics division in the first city was extremely busy. It was already time for the autumn harvest. The harvest of the provinces under Yang Xie's control this year was very good, especially after the centralized management of the grain fields. After the centralized planting, not only did it save more effort and people, but the amount of grain harvested was also 20% more than in previous years. This 20% should not be underestimated. It would increase the food for millions of people. This also indirectly made the army's work of collecting grain more smooth. Carriages and loads of provisions were piled up in the granary that had been prepared long ago in the first city. More new foreign troops from all over the world had also gathered here. As the head of the logistics division, the number of soldiers that Yang Si needed to be allocated to him had reached a terrifying 300,000. Just this alone had made many officers envious. Even the commander of the new army, Tiger's Mane, had come to Yang Si more than a few times. The general idea was to ask him to leave enough soldiers for himself. Of course, the quality must be guaranteed. That's right, the new army was going to be rebuilt into a new army group. The position of the group commander was naturally Tiger's Mane. According to the plan given by Yang Qindong, the three armies under his command were the 101st, 102nd, and 103rd armies, as well as a direct division of the army group. Each army group would be divided into 4 divisions, and each division had 4 regiments. A division would have 8,400 people, and an army group would have 33,600 people. In addition to the 3 armies, a direct division would have 10,000 people. In this way, the new army group would have 118,000 combat troops. If the logistics, medical personnel, and headquarters personnel were included, the total number would be more than 120,000. From one army group to an army group, there were many areas that needed to be reformed, and the number of officers that needed to be used was even more. It was not something that could be completed overnight. This time, Tiger's Mane had informed Yang Si in advance so that he could leave behind more troops that were good at fighting. Even Tiger's Mane had made a move, let alone others. For a time, Yang Si, who was only a division commander, became a hot steamed bun in everyone's eyes. Countless people came to ask for advice. However, with the example of Yang Lu, Yang Si was able to stay true to his heart. He knew how to balance the 4 sides and supplement the strengths of the troops to complement each other. For example, in the past few days, after receiving the telegram from the 6th young master, Yang Si immediately made arrangements. He immediately arranged for the 1st Army, 2nd Army, and the new 5 armies, a total of 3 armies of more than 100,000 people to move from the first city to the Yilili district. Under Yang Qindong's orders and Yang Si's leadership, the original 1st Reserve Division was disbanded, and its division commander was allowed to be the commander of the 1st Army of the Outsiders. Under his command were the 301, 302, 303, and 304 divisions. The original 1st to 5th divisions were disbanded, and the original 1st Division commander Niu Duo was promoted to the commander of the 2nd Army. Under his command were the 305th, 306, 307th, and 308th divisions. Among them, the 1st Army of the Outsiders was the first to leave the first city, and the vanguard had already arrived at 8 Mile City. Then, it was the 2nd Army of the Outsiders, followed by the new 5 armies, Ancient River, and the others that Shiheng had just seen. It could be seen that this time, Yang Qindong was determined to solve the problem in one battle. He would not allow some places to be reversed. This time, he would use the situation of the army to completely occupy and control that area. After sending out 3 armies, Yang Si still had to help form a new army. In addition, he had to start forming the 3rd Army, the 4th Army, and even more armies. It had to be said that the pressure was still very great. However, Yang Si, who had great power in his hands, was both painful and happy. The Turpan kingdom was occupied, and the allied forces of the 3 countries were defeated. When the news spread to the entire Yili district, the crowd was in an uproar. Many people were shouting in their hearts that the wolf was coming, but for a moment, they were somewhat helpless. In particular, the 3 kings of this area felt even more pressure. In addition to arranging their troops tightly and recruiting soldiers, they also sent people to Turpan City, wanting to solve the problem in this area by asking for peace. Chapter 1230. The only difference between the 3 kings was the leader of Wara, Yes Hen. It could be said that he was the one who first came into contact with Yang Qindong. At that time, Yang Qindong was only the 6th brother of the Yang family and had not shown any military talent. In less than 10 years, Yang Qindong already had a territory that was countless times larger than his own. This made him feel ashamed, and at the same time, he knew that such an opponent would not back down, let alone talk about peace. Not putting his hopes on peace talks, Yeshen also did not contact the kings of the three kingdoms. In his view, since the five-star army came and they could not talk about peace, then the three kingdoms could not back down and could only fight with the five-star army. Whether or not he allied with them would not change this fact. Since that was the case, why would he need to ally with them? If he had the time, it would be better to look further and find a stronger ally to resist the five-star army. The allies that Yeshen targeted were the descendants of the Mongol White Horde, Jiani Bek Khan and his brother Kelei. In 1428 AD, the White Horde was divided, and a bull seized the opportunity to seize the ruling power of the White Horde. He and his brother Kelei rebelled against a bull's rule. After they were defeated, they led their troops to seek refuge in the eastern Chagatai Khanate. They were not welcomed by the Khanate and were arranged to be nomads between the Chu and Taraz rivers. Kelei and his men supported Jiani Bek Khan and established the Kazakh Khanate. At this time, the two of them had just become Khans. The entire Kazakh Khanate was still in a period of instability, and there were still some opposing forces that appeared from time to time. In order to gain the trust of the two brothers, Yeshen sent one of his most trusted and one of the four remaining generals, Bo-Mur, to lead 50,000 elite Walla cavalry into the Kazakh Khanate and eliminate the opposing forces one by one. In more than a month, who knew how many people they had killed, gradually stabilizing Jiani Bek Khan's position and gaining the friendship of his brother Kelei. Seeing that it was about time, Bo-Mur brought up the matter of the five-star army. He even mentioned that if the lips were gone, the teeth would feel cold. Just like the rise of the Mongol Empire in the past, the five-star army will also slaughter their way over like our ancestors. At that time, we will all become prey and be at their mercy. This was what Bo-Mur had told Janibek Khan and his brother Kelei. After that, some information regarding the five-star army was sent to the two of them. The strength and rise of the five-star army quickly aroused the vigilance of the two brothers. It was not easy for them to obtain their current territory. Of course, they would not allow others to seize it. In order to stabilize their forces, they quickly decided to send out their troops. Kelei personally led 80,000 cavalrymen and followed Bo-Mur into the Ili region, directly converging with Yeshen's troops. Yang Qindong did not know about any of this. Yang Shi's intelligence network was indeed very powerful, but he didn't pay much attention to Kazakh, which was still very far away. In his eyes, attacking and occupying Kazakh wasn't the most important thing at the moment, so he just established a small intelligence group there. In addition, that region had always been in chaos, so the intelligence network could not be of any use. This allowed the five-star army to have an additional 220,000 cavalrymen under their noses. Moreover, they were all elite cavalrymen that no one had discovered. Just like how Yang Qindong was mobilizing his troops, the enemy was also mobilizing their troops. Everyone was not idle and was racing against time to prepare. It was as if a storm was brewing. How could Yang Qindong, who was in the Turpan Palace, not know that the enemy was also preparing for war? In particular, the emissaries from the three countries had just been chased away by him. As for the idea of compensation from the three countries, he gave the most direct rejection. In his eyes, if they surrendered now, the army could live, the people could live, and even the king could live. He would give them all the best arrangements. However, it was impossible for him to withdraw his troops. The emissaries from the three countries left with regrets. Yang Qindong knew that there was no other way but to fight. It was only a fight. Who was he afraid of? Yang Qindong had absolute confidence in the five-star army. Once the reinforcements arrived, he would have enough troops. That would be the time for him to launch an all-out attack. And just as Yang Qindong was thinking about the next military plan and which country to attack first, an urgent report suddenly appeared. The world's first cavalry division stationed at the Ala mountain pass sent an urgent message, and Ili suddenly sent 80,000 troops to surround them in this area. The 1st Cavalry Division could be said to be the most powerful army under Yang Qindong's command. In terms of cold weapons alone, even Ling Feng was no match for them. If even they sent an urgent message, one could imagine how bad the situation was. Young master, according to Commander Tian Hu, they are not in any danger now, but there is no direction to break out of the encirclement. Once time passes, food will become the biggest problem. Please make a decision as soon as possible. Beta Persei, who was acting as an advisor, came to this conclusion after reading the telegram in the sand table placed in front of him. Yang Qindong supported this point of view. With the strength of the 1st Cavalry Division, it was very difficult for anyone to find trouble with them. Now that they were not breaking out of the encirclement, they were just looking for and waiting for an opportunity. Of course, it was not that the 1st Cavalry Division was not unprepared for this trip. On the contrary, they were fully prepared. Otherwise, they would not have appeared alone at the Ala Mountain Pass. If only 80,000 people wanted to find trouble with them, it would be difficult. However, if the enemy increased the number of troops, the situation would become serious. According to Tian Hu, looking for an opportunity to find the weakness of the Ili Cavalry Division that was surrounding them. Waiting was to see if Yang Qindong had a better battle plan, such as cooperating with the enemy from the inside and outside. If the 5-star army could send a large number of cavalry to support the 1st Cavalry Division, it would not be difficult to severely damage the 80,000 Ili Cavalry Division. In that case, it would be another great victory. Surrounding them but not attacking. What are they trying to do? Although Yang Qindong agreed with Beta Persei's analysis, there were still some questions in his heart that he could not explain clearly. For example, did the Ili Cavalry Division not know that it would be easy to be attacked from both inside and outside if they only surrounded them without attacking? If they knew and still did this, then what were they relying on? Young master, could it be that they know the power of the 1st Cavalry Division and don't want to take the initiative to attack? They want to wait for us to break out of the encirclement. After all, we are not as familiar with the local terrain as they are. Beta Persei heard Yang Qindong's doubts and expressed his thoughts again. Yang Qindong nodded after listening. We can't rule out this possibility, but we also have to guard against them having any backup plans, such as surrounding them to attack the reinforcements. Beta Persei was startled when he heard this, then said, Young master, are you saying that they are using the 1st Cavalry Division as bait to lure us over and then block our reinforcements? Aren't they a little too bold? Is it? On the battlefield, it's either you die or I live. It's okay to be bold, sometimes you can only achieve great things by daring to think. Yang Qindong laughed, then shook his head indifferently and said, it doesn't matter if they are plotting something or not, since they have surrounded the 1st Cavalry Division, then we have to save them. In this case, get the Far Eastern Army's 1st Cavalry Division's division commander, Dai Qua. The 1st Cavalry Division was surrounded near the Ala Mountain Pass, which was indeed Ili Cavalry Division's doing. The reason why they did this was just as Yang Qindong thought. They wanted to attract more 5-star army to appear here and then defeat them one by one. Since there was no possibility for the two sides to solve the problem through peace talks, then the only thing left was to fight. Therefore, Ili Cavalry Division was prepared to make the first move. After contacting Yarkand and Turpan, they sent 80,000 cavalrymen to block the 1st Cavalry Division at the Ala Mountain Pass. With 80,000 cavalrymen against the 16,000 soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division, it was exactly 5 times their strength. This was the reason why Ili Cavalry Division dared to do this. They had even more confidence because of the support of the Yarkiang Kingdom, the Turpan Kingdom, and the Vala tribe. Yes, after Yeshen received the support of 80,000 cavalrymen from the Kazakh Khanate, his military strength reached 220,000. This gave him the confidence to compete with Yang Qindong again. Not to mention, this time, they were in the dark, while the 5-star army was in the light, and with the full support of Ili Cavalry Division, he really couldn't think of any possibility of failure. The defeat of the allied army under the Turpan Kingdom taught the 3 kings a good lesson. After the incident, although they had criticized each other, the moment they sat down, the grim situation forced them to unite and fight against the 5-star army. After experiencing the trauma of the war, the foundation of the alliance became firmer. After seeing the power of the 5-star army, the 3 kingdoms started to recruit more soldiers. This wasn't just about the gains and losses of a city or a land. It involved the destruction of a country, so they couldn't help but muster up all their energy. Under the recruitment, the military strength of the three kingdoms was constantly increasing. Among them, Ili Cavalry Division recruited 100,000 soldiers, increasing their military strength to 270,000. Yarkand recruited 100,000 soldiers, increasing their military strength to 220,000. Turpan was even more impressive. They had always been hiding their soldiers among the people. This time, they recruited 150,000 soldiers, increasing their military strength to 250,000. If the 140,000 from Wara and the 80,000 from Kazakh were added, they would have another 220,000 soldiers. In total, they had nearly 1,000,000 soldiers, and most of them were cavalrymen who were good at fighting. If it wasn't for this recruitment, the five powers wouldn't have known that they had such great power. When this number was placed in front of them, it gave them endless confidence. Otherwise, they wouldn't have dared to attack the strongest of the five-star army, the 1st Cavalry Division. Chapter 1231. In the words of Prime Minister Apu of Ili, if they were to move, they would send out the strongest troops of the five-star army. As long as the 1st Cavalry Division was destroyed, the morale of the five-star army would be affected, and it would be time for them to counterattack. With such a consensus, Ili sent out 80,000 troops to surround the Ayla mountain pass. This was because the other factions were slow in deploying their troops. Otherwise, it wouldn't be 80,000 troops, but 180,000 or 280,000. Surrounding the 1st Cavalry Division was only the first step of Apu's plan. While he urged the other factions to send more troops, he was also waiting for the five-star army's response. If they wanted to break out of the encirclement, he would use his advantage in numbers to deal a heavy blow to them. On the other hand, if they decided to defend and wait for reinforcements to arrive, he would be able to use this time to dispatch more troops here and kill off the reinforcements one by one. Now that Apu had made the first move, it was time to see how the five-star army would react. He wanted to see how the famous King Wunan of Damyang would break out of this situation. Apu didn't have to wait for too long before the five-star army's reinforcements appeared. It was the Liaodong Army's 1st Cavalry Division. A total of 8,400 people rode out of the city. This scene was quickly noticed by the scouts and was reported to Apu and the other factions. Ha, they really are preparing for a middle attack. But this Bugnam of Gojoseon is looking down on someone too much. He only sent out 10,000 cavalry, does he really think he can turn the situation around? Men, inform King Harden Barter and ask him to make a move. After receiving the report, Apu revealed a look of understanding. In his view, Yang Qindong's move wasn't very smart. Just as a huge battle was brewing in Ili and could erupt at any time, a group of unexpected guests came to Shaojing City. The reason why it was called a group was because they didn't have many people, only 6 in total. Moreover, they were all very young. None of them were over 30 years old. Some of their faces were still brimming with youthfulness. Although they were young and few in number, no one could look down on them because they were all from Crimson City. They also had an identity that countless officials and military officers feared: disciplinary investigators. The Discipline Department was a new department established by the Crimson City City Lord, Yu Qian, after consulting with Yang Qindong. The scope of its management was very similar to the Commission for Discipline and Discipline in the modern era. At the same time, it also had the power of the Military Law Department. Its full name was the Disciplinary Investigation Department. Their duty was to investigate whether any official had colluded with the enemy, betrayed the country, or violated discipline. They were different from the Ministry of Supervision and the Ministry of Anti-Corruption. The corruption and abuse of power of the officials were not within their scope of investigation. What they valued was the integrity and loyalty of the officials. It could be said that this was a department to consolidate Yang Qindong's absolute dominance. This department had just been established not too long ago. In fact, they weren't even fully staffed yet. However, they had already appeared in Shaojing City. From this, it could be seen that they were going to do a big case for everyone to see. At the same time, they were also taking the opportunity to raise the prestige of their disciplinary investigation department. Unfortunately, the new Second Army became the first target of their investigation. When he received the notice from the Crimson City Lord, the commander of the new Second Army let out a long sigh. He knew that the matter of him faking his surrender was not over. Now, what should have come had finally come. When he received the news that the Disciplinary Investigation Department was coming to Shaojing City, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Kang Ji, came to the headquarters of the new Second Army with a face full of anger. The moment he saw Shaojing, he said with a look of indignation, "General, what is this Disciplinary Investigation Department doing? Even the Bugnam of Gojoseon didn't pursue our problem. What do they want to investigate? A straight foot is not afraid of a crooked shadow. If they want to investigate, then let them. We didn't do anything wrong. What are we afraid of?" Although Shaojing was also a little angry, considering that Su Yuan was recommended by him and that he really did betray him, just based on this point, even if it was a big mistake that couldn't be remedied, it could only be investigated by others. Shaojing's attitude didn't satisfy Kang Ji. He didn't come just to complain, but also to come up with an idea. "General, why don't we send a telegram to the king and tell him about this situation?" "No. The 6th young master is now fighting with Ili in the front. We can't be distracted." Shaojing hurriedly waved his hand. He didn't want to trouble Yang Qindong because of his own matter. Although he was a little conflicted this time, why wouldn't he want to clear his name through this kind of investigation? Seeing that Shaojing didn't agree, Kang Ji said indignantly, "But the king knows about our situation. He also said that we were wronged. We are people who have done meritorious deeds." "Okay, Mr. Kang, did you really do something wrong to the king and the 5-star army?" Shaojing asked angrily when he saw that Kang Ji was still pestering him. "Of course not." Kang Ji patted his chest, looking like he didn't have to be afraid of ghosts screaming at his door if he didn't do anything wrong. "Since you didn't do anything wrong, why should we be afraid of investigating? Just let them do what they want. We should still do what we should do." Shaojing waved his hand as he said this, but then his tone softened a lot. "Actually, this might not be a bad thing. After the investigation, there won't be any problems. Our new Second Army can be considered to have turned over a new leaf, and other people won't be able to pester us about this problem anymore." Kang Ji, who originally wanted to continue refuting, heard this last sentence, his eyes couldn't help but light up. "That's right. Anyway, we have never betrayed the king or the 5-star army. If they want to investigate, let them investigate. After this investigation, they must give us a conclusion." Seeing that Kang Ji had finally thought it through, Shaojing also let out a sigh of relief. What he was most worried about was that the officers under him would be conflicted, which would affect their work. One had to know that the provisions, soldiers, and civilians that were heading to the Ili area had to pass through Shaojing City. Shaojing City had to receive a lot of people every day, so it was absolutely impossible to go on a business trip. "Don't worry. Castellan Yuqian has already given us an accurate answer. After this investigation, there will be a conclusion. With this conclusion, no one will talk about the new Second Army's past." Shaojing calmed Kang Ji's anger, but he didn't know that some people were angry because of this. At this moment, in front of Shaojing City, 6 young people were standing there. Their faces were very ugly. The leader was wearing a long robe. At this moment, he was frowning and covering his nose. From time to time, there would be civilians and soldiers entering the city. When they walked past him, they would bring different smells, which seemed to make him very annoyed. Speaking of which, he had always lived in Qiqian City. The hygiene there was excellent, and the air was good. When had he ever seen such a scene? The civilians and soldiers were rushing through the night without the conditions to take a bath, so it was reasonable that there were all kinds of smells on their bodies. This made Muda, the leader of the Disciplinary Investigation Department, have an ugly expression. What made him even uglier was that he had already arrived at the entrance of Shaojing City, but there was still no crowd to welcome him. Although Yang Qindong advocated that Yang Xie didn't like to do such things, but when he really came, there wasn't even a single person to welcome him. This made Muda angry. From his point of view, this was the new Second Army not putting him and the Disciplinary Investigation Department in their eyes. You better not have any problems. Otherwise, I will make an example out of you. After a flash of anger passed through Muda's heart, he covered his nose again. He raised his head and waved his hand as he led his 5 team members into Shaojing City. In the new Second Army's headquarters, Shaojing had just met with a passing 5-star army commander. They discussed how long they would stay here and how much food they would bring with them. After that, a soldier came to report that Muda, who claimed to be from Qiqian City, had arrived at the headquarters and wanted to meet with him. From Qiqian City, and he's a leader. After Shaojing heard this, he quickly understood that this must be the group that was investigating him. He immediately said, "Let's go, lead the way." In the reception room of the military headquarters, Muda and his 6 team members had already found a place to sit down. After coming here, they could finally drink tea without having to smell the unpleasant smell. The 6 of them looked much better. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of hurried footsteps came from outside the hall. Then, Shibi, who was wearing a major general's uniform, walked into everyone's line of sight. The moment they saw the major general, the young men in the hall wanted to stand up. However, when their gazes landed on their leader, Muda, they realized that he did not do anything. They could not help but put their raised butts back down. Compared to a major general, they valued the identity of their team leader more. After all, that was the person who could decide their future. Of course, Muda also saw the departure, but because he was angry that the other party did not welcome him, he wanted to show him who was the boss, so he sat down and did not move. She slowly stood up when she was about 5 steps away from him. After he entered the hall, no one paid any attention to him. His heart skipped a beat. He had a feeling that the investigation team did not come with good intentions. Because Shibi had once betrayed the 5-star army, even if it was forced by circumstances, even if it was just an act, in many people's eyes, it was a fact, a part of history. Therefore, he felt guilty and did not reject the investigation team. However, the personal guard beside him didn't think so. Seeing that the 6 guests were still so arrogant even when the military commander was here, he couldn't help but be furious. He shouted, "The military commander is here. Don't you know how to stand up and welcome him?" Muda, who had already raised half of his buttocks, heard this and sat back down. He then said in an annoyed tone, "Oh, I didn't know that Commander Shi was so arrogant. I say, Commander, you won't punish us for not welcoming you, right?" Chapter 1232. Step down. Shibi had a premonition that something was wrong when the guard shouted those words. Seeing that Muda was indeed angry, he hurriedly scolded the guard. Then, he squeezed out a smile and took the initiative to bow and extend his right hand to Muda. "You must be team leader Muda." As the saying goes, a slap doesn't hit a smiling face. The other party was also a major general, so Muda couldn't go too far. He stood up a little bashfully and shook Shibi's hand. "I am Muda, the team leader in charge of this investigation. And, seeing that Commander Shibi is so travel-worn, you must be very busy." At this moment, Shibi didn't look travel-worn at all. He was wearing a brand new Major General's uniform and was abnormally clean. This was what he had just changed into. In his mind, since it was someone from Qixian, then it was someone from the headquarters. He should treat them well. That was why he changed into a clean set of clothes. He didn't expect that this would cause Muda to misunderstand. However, Shibi didn't know this. He thought that Muda was being polite, so he told the truth. "It's normal for me to be busy. Just now, I met with a new logistics officer of the 5th Army to discuss the matter of food. That's why I came late." Shibi was naturally telling the truth. However, in Muda's ears, it wasn't the case. A major general actually lowered himself to meet with a regimental officer. Furthermore, he was in charge of logistics. Who would believe this? Muda's first impression was that Shibi was being perfunctory. Oh, so you're saying that Commander Shi is really busy. A regimental officer can waste so much of your time. It seems that there will be battalion and company officers next. Does that mean that in the future, even a small soldier will need you to personally meet him? Muda's words finally made Shibi feel that something was wrong. He originally thought that Muda was being polite. Now, it seemed that Muda was simply looking for trouble. No matter what, Shibi was still a major general. He was used to being dignified. The reason he lowered his head wasn't because of Muda, but because of City Lord Yu Qian. Now that Muda didn't believe him, why should he be polite? He immediately said with a straight face, "Team Leader Muda, I don't know what you mean by this. Could it be that the commander couldn't meet the regiment commander? We are all soldiers of the 5-star army, and we are all ordinary members." In the words of the 6th young master, there is no distinction between high and low. The sudden counterattack stunned Muda. The 6th young master's words made Muda's expression turn ugly. There were not many people who could call Yang Qindong the 6th young master. Only some old Yang Xie people and some important people could call him that. For example, Muda could only be called Bugnam of Gojoseon. This was the difference between them. While Muda was still in a daze, the second wave of attacks arrived. "Leader Muda, what you said just now is just a small soldier." "I don't agree with that either. The reason why the 5-star army was invincible was because of the joint efforts of countless ordinary soldiers. There are no small characters among them, so please be careful with your words." It was a slap to the face. Initially, he wanted to show off his strength to the other party, but now, he was the one being taught a lesson. However, the parting words were extremely dignified and reasonable. Even if Muda wanted to refute, he couldn't. For a moment, he could only stand there with his face alternating between red and white. He knew that he would offend team leader Muda, but he was not afraid. He was confident that he would not be investigated. Of course, he wouldn't stick his warm face to some cold butt. He immediately turned around and left with the excuse that he was busy with work. She had only appeared for a short while before leaving. He did not even recognize the other members of the task force and did not even greet them. This angered everyone. Among them, Muda's assistant, Chang Wu, said angrily, "Humph. What was there to be proud of? Wasn't he just relying on his status as a commander? Even if you anger us, we'll still investigate you." Yes, investigate him properly. Didn't a dignified commander also do something like defecting to the enemy? At this moment, the other team members also shouted in unison. They had all grown up in Crimson City and had witnessed the process of Yang faction growing from nothing to power. Because of this, they shared the glory and felt that Crimson City being where it was today was inseparable from their hard work. It could be said that these people had already tied the glory of Qiqian City to themselves. This was also the result of Yang Qindong and Yu Qian's discussion. It was to let everyone have a sense of ownership. Only then, could they better protect and develop this place. Under this kind of education, it was extremely successful. Every time the news of the 5-star army's victory spread, the citizens of the city would cheer. However, if there was victory, there would be defeat. Just like when the new Second Army surrendered to Baiming, when this matter spread to Qiqian City, who knew how many people scolded Shi Bei for being an ingrate, and these few were among them. With preconceived notions, it would be strange if they had a good impression of Shi Bei. Even though the new Second Army returned to Yang Xie's embrace, in many people's eyes, it was just because they couldn't bear to part with him. Who asked Yang Xie to make the 5-star army so powerful? What else could they do if they didn't surrender? This was also the reason why the investigation team came to the new Second Army. Some of them suspected that Shi Bei was a disloyal person. In addition, the investigation team had just been established and they needed to establish their authority. What could be more influential than investigating a commander? Therefore, Muda came here with the intention of finding problems and finding fault with them. This kind of nitpicking goal was not to mention that the new Second Army had already gone through a period of turmoil. Even if it didn't, there would still be turmoil. That was the truth. After meeting with Shibei on bad terms, Muda and the others began to get busy. They used their authority to find many of the new Second Army's low-ranking officers to have a heart-to-heart talk. Although it was called a heart-to-heart talk, it was actually coercion and enticement. They took the initiative to guide the results they wanted. The commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Kang Ji, quickly found out about this matter. He originally wanted to go and tell Shiba about it, but after thinking about how his previous visit to Shiba was fruitless, he actually went straight to the 6th base in a fit of anger. He directly said that they were here to cause trouble, and had a huge argument with Captain Muda. Muda was put on the spot by a division commander. In a fit of anger, he found the members of the public security in Shaojing City. They had already received orders from Shaojing City to cooperate with the investigation team. Immediately, a team of 20 people walked out and went to the 1st Cavalry Division's headquarters to arrest Division Commander Kang Ji. It was naturally impossible for 20 members of the public security to do as they pleased in the headquarters. As soon as they entered the headquarters, they were surrounded by the guards. All the weapons in their hands were also taken away, waiting for Division Commander Kang Ji to deal with them. To everyone's surprise, Kang Ji actually let these people go and returned their weapons. Not only that, he also took the initiative to walk out of the headquarters with the 20 members of the public security. The moment he walked out of the door, he looked back at the door with a determined look in his eyes. Kang Ji was taken away in front of many officers in the headquarters. This news immediately reached Shibei's ears. He immediately rode to the investigation team's office. Unfortunately, he didn't even see Muda. Only his assistant, Chang Wu, stopped him. Commander Shi, Kang Ji has a big problem. He is currently under investigation. Before the problem is solved, no one is allowed to see him. Please go back. After saying this, Chang Wu immediately asked the members of the public security team to close the door and shut Shibei out. After being given the cold shoulder, Li Xian's face turned extremely ugly. He swayed on the horse and fainted. Fortunately, the bodyguard beside him reacted quickly and caught him. However, because of this, Li Xian still fell ill. An army's work schedule was instantly affected when both the commander and the 1st Division commander couldn't work at the same time. The most direct result was that many soldiers, civilians, and food supplies passing through Shaojing City to Ili Lianli had to stop because of this. The longer they stopped, the more complicated the problem would become and harder to solve. The other officers of the new Second Army saw that the situation was getting out of hand and quickly notified the new First Army. In a sense, everyone was a military unit, but the new Second Army was under the management of the new First Army. In the headquarters of the new First Army, Tiger's Mane's face darkened when he heard about the new Second Army's situation. What the hell? Don't they know what time it is? The war in Ili Lianli is at a critical time. Why do they need an investigation team? That's right, Tiger's Mane. I think these people are just here to cause trouble. The Logistics Division commander, Yang Si, also nodded and said in agreement. He was a practical person and admired people who did things. He hated it when people stabbed people in the back. No, Shaojing City is a transit battle zone. We can't let it fall into chaos. We have to send someone there to solve the problem there. Tiger's Mane shook his head and said as if he had made up his mind. Tiger's Mane, I'll go. Yang Si thought about it and took the initiative to volunteer. Most people wouldn't give face to people from Qiqian City. In the entire first city, only 3 people could give Qiqian Fu pressure. They were Tiger's Mane, Yu Mian, and Yang Si. Needless to say, Tiger's Mane was the commander of the new First Army and would soon be the commander of the new First Army. He was also Yang Qindong's study companion since he was young. No matter which identity he used, it was enough to give the people in the Qiqian City headquarters pressure. However, it was too flattering for him to meet an investigation team as Tiger's Mane. So it was not suitable. Yu Mian was Yu Qian's eldest son and was from Qiqian City. Of course, there was no problem. It was just that the literati's method of doing things was not decisive enough. What Shajing City needed now was a thunderous method to solve everything. It was not suitable for him to go. Chapter 1233. In the end, only Yang Si was left. Although he was only a logistics division commander, his authority in the rear was greater than that of any army. In addition, he was a servant of the Yang family manor and was one of Yang Qingdong's most trusted people. He was the most suitable person to go. Okay, you go. Investigate the matter as thoroughly as possible. As long as you don't violate discipline, you can be more decisive. Tiger's Mane hesitated for a moment before agreeing to Yang Si's request. Tiger's Mane, don't worry. I know what to do. Yang Si nodded and left the new army headquarters. He returned to the logistics division and found a few deputies to arrange a task for him. Then, he set off with a small team of 50 soldiers. Shajing City. The bustling city was about to become chaotic. Facts proved that the army could not do without a leader. Without the unified management of the army commander, the other 3 division commanders found it difficult to control the situation no matter how hard they tried. Not to mention, the 3 division commanders were also angry. In their view, the investigation team was clearly looking for trouble. With such a mentality, it would be strange if they could do a good job. 4 days later, when Yang Si arrived at Shajing City, he saw carriages loaded with provisions stopped in the middle of the street, unable to advance or retreat. With so many provisions placed there, if there was chaos, it would be a big problem. Yang Si's eyes flashed with anger. He asked the staff of the new Second Army who came to greet him. After learning the location of the investigation team, he spurred his horse and rushed straight there. The investigation team chose to work in a courtyard in the south of the city. The terrain was remote and there were few people walking around. It was a good place for business. When Yang Si, who was dressed casually, came from afar, he saw 6 members of the Public Security Bureau standing guard at the entrance of the courtyard. Yang Si's appearance also alarmed the 6 members of the Public Security Bureau. When they saw a group of cavalry coming from afar with a murderous aura, one of them turned around and went into the courtyard to report. The other 5 assumed a defensive posture. Who? Yang Si stopped the horse and jumped down from the gate of the courtyard. He didn't even look at the 5 police officers as he strode into the courtyard. Then, 5 figures blocked his path. Who are you? This is a restricted area. No one is allowed to enter without permission. Naturally, the members of Shajing City's Public Security Bureau would not recognize the high and mighty Yang Si. However, their obstruction had infuriated Yang Si. It was said that one's subtlety gradually deepened. He could imagine the arrogance and despotism of the investigation team just by looking at these police officers. He immediately snorted coldly. Get out of my way, or else. What else? Yang Si didn't say, but his bodyguards were already waving the sabers in their hands, looking like they were about to attack. Controlling hundreds of thousands of warriors from various countries and races waiting to be assigned, there were many people to choose from. Yang Si's personal guards were not ordinary people. Just the aura they exuded made the faces of the 5 members of the Public Security Bureau change drastically. Although the other party didn't make a move, they had a feeling that if these people were to make a move, they wouldn't have any power to resist. Get out of my way. Yang Si didn't give the order to make a move. After all, they were Yang Si's people. After saying this, Yang Si strode into the courtyard. He pushed with both hands and the door opened. What he saw was Chang Wu and 20 members of the Public Security Bureau blocking his way. When he heard that someone was about to break into the courtyard, Chang Wu immediately volunteered to step forward. He was nervous and excited at the same time. He was nervous about who the intruder was and whether or not he would really go crazy and attack them. He was excited because if someone really did that, it would be a provocation to the entire disciplinary investigation department. In that case, they could take the opportunity to reorganize and no one would be able to say anything. With this thought in mind, Chang Wu asked preemptively when he saw the door being pushed open and a man in a long robe walked out. Who are you? How dare you break into the Disciplinary Investigation Department's restricted area? Put down your weapons and surrender immediately, and you may receive lenient treatment when you are sentenced. His loud shout was quite imposing and achieved Sir's intention of seizing people. If it was a coward, they might have been scared silly by this shout. What kind of person was Yang Si? He only had one master, and that was Yang Qindong. The people he usually associated with were at the level of military advisors. Why would he care about a small fry like Chang Wu? He glanced at Chang Wu casually and asked, "You're the leader of the Disciplinary Investigation Department?" "I'm not." Chang Wu answered instinctively, but he seemed to remember something and explained, When he heard that the other party was not the leader of the Disciplinary Investigation Department, Yang Si immediately lost interest in the conversation and waved his hand. "Where is your leader? Take me to him." "And who the hell are you?" "Our leader is not someone you can meet just because you want to." Chang Wu was a little annoyed that he had been interrupted, so his tone became a little more serious as he spoke. As he spoke, he looked at Yang Si in a provocative manner. "Ha ha." This time, Yang Si laughed. It was just a meeting with a team leader. He really didn't take it seriously. As long as he was willing, he could even meet the head of the Disciplinary Investigation Department, let alone the leader. His laugh was because he was amused by Chang Wu's words. However, this laugh seemed a little guilty in Chang Wu's eyes. He thought that the other party was afraid and was trying to cover it up with laughter. "Humph. You don't have to pretend this time. I'm afraid you'll have to talk to me humbly next." While Chang Wu was still fantasizing in his heart, Yang Si spoke again. However, he had already put away his smile and his expression became very serious. He said word by word, "Who do you think you are? Get lost." The friendly gesture that he was waiting for did not appear. Instead, he was shouted angrily. This made Chang Wu's expression change drastically. He involuntarily stretched out his right index finger and was about to curse. Before he could speak or do anything, the bodyguards brought by Yang Si moved again. One of them rushed forward and dislocated Chang Wu's chin. Then, he swallowed the words that he wanted to say. Then, one of them flashed an identity token in front of the more than 20 members of the Public Security Bureau who were making a move. "We're from the Logistics Division of the Beginning City. We need to do something here. Get out of the way." The moment the name of the Logistics Division of the Beginning City was revealed, the expressions of the more than 20 members of the Public Security Bureau changed drastically. Then, they obediently leaned to the side. Although the military and the Public Security Bureau did not have much interaction, and even a major general did not have any privileges in front of ordinary members of the Public Security Bureau. However, this did not mean that Yang Si did not have any. He was Yang Qindong's servant. At the same time, his logistics division was also responsible for sending backup forces to the local Public Security Bureau. For example, some young and strong men who were not selected by other armies were likely to turn around and enter the local Public Security Bureau. Some old veterans who were injured but not very seriously would also be sent to the Public Security Bureau. These things were all decided by the Logistics Division. Therefore, Yang Si could be said to be normal for them. When they thought about how even their branch chief had to smile when he saw the Logistics Division, they were just ordinary members. What was the big deal? They could not afford to offend such a person. Immediately, they hurriedly retreated to the side, looking as obedient as they could be. Yang Si did not look at them again. This time, he came to look for the investigation team leader. As for other things, he did not care about them. He still strode in and soon arrived at the inner courtyard. He saw an officer in a captain's uniform being interrogated in a relatively spacious hall. Perhaps because they were too focused on the interrogation, those people actually didn't notice Yang Si's arrival. Yang Si also wanted to see how the investigation team worked. He immediately waved his hand and asked the soldiers to be quiet. He stood there and watched from a distance. "Speak, Company Commander Li." "It's still the same question. When you surrendered to the Baiming army, you had no choice. But when you turned around and surrendered to the 5-star army, was it also because you had no choice? The person who was interrogating was the team leader, Muda. At this time, he was looking at the company commander named Li Yun with a serious face. To be able to become a company commander, one must have experienced life and death situations. They were all on the front lines. People like this, there were tall, short, fat, thin, and had different education levels. They might even be different races. However, they all had one thing in common, which was that they were not afraid of death. Facing the serious Muda, Li Yun's face did not have any seriousness. Instead, he laughed and said, "I say, team leader Li, you have asked the same question many times. I have also answered many times." At that time, Shaojing City and Jingzhou City were heavily surrounded by the Baiming army. There were no reinforcements on the outside and no food on the inside. We had no choice but to feign civility and surrender to the Baiming army. However, our hearts have always been with the 5-star army. It is best described as being in one's camp while our hearts are in another's camp. As for us returning to the 5-star army, everyone was willing. It was also the result of everyone's wishes. What is there to be helpless about? Shut up. Hearing Li Yun still say the same thing, Muda angrily said, "Company Commander Li, please face my question." "I am not answering." Li Yun's expression became more serious as expected. However, the words he said made Muda and the others quite angry. "But what I said is the truth. I can't go against my conscience and say what you want." "What do you mean by what we want?" "We are investigating the truth." Muda, who was angered by Li Yun's behavior, snorted coldly and said, "Fine, since you said that you have always been loyal to the 5-star army, then let me ask you, how did Captain Wu Xiaoyi die? Was it your commander who killed him personally?" Chapter 1234. When it came to Wu Xiaoyi's matter, Muda obviously had some confidence. This was the truth. At that time, this guard captain rushed into the Baiming army's camp and killed a few Baiming army soldiers who bullied the civilians. How happy was that? However, after he came back, he was not treated as a hero. Instead, he was killed by Shi Bei. Based on this, he had reason to suspect that Shi Bei really wanted to join the Baiming army at that time. This matter was a clear proof. He wanted to please the Baiming army. When it came to this matter, Commander Li Yun's expression became much more respectful. "That's right. Guard Captain Wu was killed by our military leader." "Oh, quickly tell me, quickly record it." Seeing that Li Yun was finally going to fall into the trap, Muda's expression became a little excited. The first sentence was to encourage Li Yun, and the second sentence was to the team member who was responsible for recording beside him. Ignoring Muda's excitement, Li Yun seemed to have fallen into some kind of memory. With a solemn expression, he said, "At that time, when Guard Captain Wu was killed, our brothers didn't understand. Some of them even wanted to leave the barracks. However, because the Baiming army guarded them tightly, and we didn't have a way to return to the Sure city at that time, we had to suppress this thought. However, it wasn't until later when we rebelled against the Baiming army and the military leader personally held a memorial service for Guard Captain Wu that everyone realized that it was just a show. If we didn't do this, the Baiming army wouldn't have believed us, and we wouldn't have been able to regain control of Shaojing and Jingzhou cities so smoothly." After saying this truthfully, Li Yun looked at Muda with a more relaxed expression. "That's what happened. It turned out that we had indeed wronged the military leader. For this matter, many regimental and battalion-level officers took the initiative to apologize to the military leader. I also wanted to go, but because my rank was too low, I didn't go." Hearing that Li Yun wanted to apologize to Shi Bei for this matter, Muda was completely angry. "No, it's not like this. The so-called memorial service is just an act of mending the pen after the sheep are lost. You were all deceived by him. They only did this because they had no other choice. She is a complete opportunist." "No." Li Yun got angry when he heard someone slandering his commander. He shouted back, "This matter was discussed between the commander and division commander Kong Ji. Even the deceased Captain Wu agreed to it. This matter was explained later. No, no. Muda shook his head crazily. How can a person be willing to die for a plan? That's just what they said. It's basically Shi Bei and Kong Ji's false confessions. That's the truth. You've all been deceived. With Wood's way of thinking, he could not accept the fact that someone had died in order to complete a quest. Moreover, the completion rate of this quest was so low. Therefore, he would never believe that such a thing would happen. From this, he concluded that all of this was a conspiracy that Shi Bei and Kong Ji had discussed. Because of this, he had detained Kong Ji in order to cause chaos in Shi Bei's army. Now, Shi Bei was indeed staying at home. Although it was said that he was recuperating, according to his analysis, this was clearly a manifestation of fear. Muda was still shouting and yelling. He even wanted to force Li Yun to admit everything. As a bystander, Yang Si couldn't stand it anymore. Some people didn't understand Wu Xiaoyi's actions. However, as someone who was also from the military, he believed that when things were urgent, someone would make such a sacrifice. On the battlefield, there were many people who sacrificed themselves to save their comrades. Yang Si didn't want to see Muda oppressing Li Yun like this. He coughed lightly and walked out. This sound also attracted everyone's attention. When Muda realized that there were still bystanders in the courtyard, his expression darkened. He said with obvious displeasure, "Who are you? Who allowed you to be here? Where's Chang Wu? Where are the public security team members who are maintaining order? There's no need to yell. They're all outside. They've been restrained by my men," Yang Si said as he strode forward. When he heard that Yang Si had restrained Chang Wu and the others, Muda's face flashed with anger. "Who are you? Who gave you the authority to do this? Who gave you the authority to coerce and extort confessions? Is this how the people in the disciplinary investigation department work? I'm going to ask Chief Guan Wenjing about this. How does he teach his subordinates?" Seeing that Muda was still putting on airs in front of him, Yang Si was also angry. This person was clearly a mad dog who would bite anyone he caught. He wouldn't let such a person get away with it. When Muda saw that someone was quarreling with him, he wanted to refute in a fit of anger. However, when he heard the other party mention the minister's name, he was stunned. He had a feeling that the person who came this time was of high status. Muda shut his mouth, and Yang Si ignored him. Instead, he strode into the interrogation room. First, he looked at the sign with the word interrogation hanging by the door. His right hand suddenly moved, and he pulled out his saber and slashed at it. Ding dong! The wooden sign with the word interrogation fell. Yang Si's voice rang out. "Who gave you the authority to interrogate our outstanding officers without any evidence? Let me tell you, this is only an interrogation and not an interrogation. You have to remember your authority." Under such a domineering saber, the room was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. A few members of the disciplinary investigation department stared at Yang Si with wide eyes. Obviously, they didn't expect someone to be so bold as to smash the sign in their office. Just when the room was completely silent, the company commander named Li Yun stood up and saluted. He asked tentatively, You are Division Commander Yang?" "Oh, you know me." Yang Si had a good impression of this neither servile nor overbearing Li Yun. He smiled and replied. "It's really Division Commander Yang. I'm Li Yun, the company commander of the 2nd Battalion of the 3rd Regiment of the 2nd Cavalry Division. I've seen Division Commander Yang once from afar." As he spoke, Li Yun scratched his head embarrassedly. He probably also knew that his status was too far away from Yang Si's. "Oh, you're quite considerate. Your performance just now was not bad. You didn't embarrass the military." Yang Si looked at Li Yun and seemed to be more and more satisfied. While the two of them were still talking, Muda's spirits rose again. He originally thought that the person who came was a big shot since he even knew the chief's name. Now that he heard Li Yun call him division commander, he was relieved. He strode forward and looked at Yang Si with an arrogant attitude and said, "So it's Division Commander Yang. Hee, how bold of you. Not only did you dare to order us around, you even dared to destroy our office supplies. This time, you're in big trouble. Let me tell you, even if I mention our chief's name, no one can protect you." Yang Si was still puzzled. How did the other party have the guts to appear in front of him? When he heard the other party call him Division Commander, he came to his senses and laughed. He pointed at Muda and said, "Oh, I'm a Division Commander. Can't I care about these things? Humph. You can't even protect yourself. What can you care about?" Muda looked at Yang Si with disdain. Obviously, he had already sentenced the other party to death in his heart. This time, he came under the authority of the Disciplinary Investigation Department. He was personally reported to Bugnam of Gojoseon by the City Lord of Crimson City. With such confidence, he wasn't afraid of a small division commander. One must know that in the room over there was still a division commander with outstanding military achievements. Snobbish. In the past, Yang Si didn't have a deep understanding of this saying. Now, he finally understood. He couldn't help but laugh out loud. Muda, who was beside him, also laughed out loud. Obviously, he thought that Yang Si's identity had been exposed by him, so he didn't know what to do. He had already decided that he would take Yang Si down and report to the headquarters. He would convict him of contempt and provocation of the Disciplinary Investigation Department. Before taking down a division commander, taking care of a division commander was a good thing. After laughing for a while, Yang Si suddenly stopped. He looked at Muda fiercely. He really didn't know why the Disciplinary Investigation Department would send such a person to do this. There was a saying that one could achieve anything with effort. With such a person in the Disciplinary Investigation Department, Yang Si was really afraid that he would get into big trouble. "Alright, since you're not a good person, I'll take you down first. I want to see if you're clean or not." Yang Si was completely angered by Muda. He had already made up his mind. As for whether this would offend some people, he didn't care. At most, he would ask for forgiveness from the young master. However, before Yang Si could do anything, Muda spoke first. He said to the team members behind him, "Everyone saw it. This person dared to openly provoke and destroy public property of the Disciplinary Investigation Department. He's suspected of sabotaging our investigation. Shouldn't we arrest him and punish him?" "Yes." The members of the investigation team naturally followed Muda's lead. After all, Yang Si's actions just now were indeed a provocative act. Good. After receiving the support of his companions, Muda shouted, "Then what are you waiting for? Hurry up and arrest him." Muda actually wanted to arrest him. Yang Si was really stunned by this order. He didn't know what gave the other party the confidence to arrest a divisional cadre without any evidence. Could this be the prestige of the headquarters? Originally, he couldn't find a good reason. Now that Muda wanted to arrest him, it didn't matter if he took action. Even if the young master found out about this, he wasn't afraid anymore. So at this moment, instead of being angry, he laughed. He casually waved his hand and gestured to the soldiers behind him to arrest Muda. Chapter 1235. These bodyguards might not be able to out-talk the people from the investigation team, but if they were to fight, who would be their match? At that moment, the bodyguards swarmed forward, and the 5 members of the investigation team, including Mold, were crudely pressed to the ground. "What are you doing? Are you trying to rebel?" Muda was furious when he saw that his division commander had actually made the first move. "Hee, it's not up to you to decide whether we're rebelling or not. I see that you don't have any other abilities, but you're quite good at making accusations. Men, lock them up and interrogate them properly. I want to see how clean they are." Yang Si was also furious. This time, he wanted to investigate them properly. Since he had already made a move, he wanted to see things through to the end. He had a feeling that there must be something behind Muda, who was easily bullied and feared the strong. Yang Si immediately took action and captured him. However, after considering some factors, he did not release Division Commander Kong Ji. Even Company Commander Li Yun was asked to stay in the courtyard and not go out. He wanted to keep the news a secret to avoid alerting the enemy. After leaving behind 30 bodyguards to interrogate Muda and the others, Yang Si left the courtyard and brought the remaining 20 bodyguards to the Second Army's headquarters. The Second Army's headquarters was no longer as lively as it used to be. Even if some of the officers were still working, it was obvious that they were not in a good mood. They all looked absent-minded. It made sense. They were busy at the front, but someone was stabbing them in the back. If it were anyone else, they would not be in the mood to work. When Yang Si appeared in the Second Army's headquarters, many people looked at him with hope. Some even wanted to report some of the investigation team's misdeeds. However, when they saw that Yang Si was very anxious and only asked where the commander was, they could only suppress the anger in their hearts and did not stop him. In the backyard of the headquarters, Yang Si saw Muda be lying on the bed and resting. She had not seen him for a while, and he seemed to have aged quite a bit. His originally black hair had also gained a bit of white. As soon as Yang Si entered the room and saw who it was, he hurriedly got up. Yang Si hurriedly strode over and reached out to stop him. "Commander Shi, there's no need to be so polite. If you're not feeling well, just lie down for a while." "Sigh, actually, I'm fine physically. It's just that I'm mentally tired." Shi Bei spoke to Yang Si as if he had seen his savior. He had already forgotten to be polite. Although Yang Qindong was a commander and the other party was only a division commander, the other party's surname was Yang. He was one of Yang Qindong's most trusted people. In terms of status, he, as a commander, was far inferior. The other party could become an existence that surpassed him at any time, and he knew this very well in his heart. Yang Si felt a burst of discomfort in his heart as he listened to Li Dong's words. A general who was good at war and strategizing was forced to lie in bed. This was the work of the investigation team. They really couldn't accomplish anything, but they were good at spoiling things. "Commander Shi, you've been wronged." Yang Si didn't know what to say. Just one sentence was enough to make this general, who had killed in all directions on the battlefield and didn't even frown in the face of death, cry. A good man with iron bones couldn't stand being wronged the most. At this moment, Shi Bei seemed to have found a soulmate. He stepped forward and held Yang Si's hand tightly. "Division Commander Yang, please tell the 6th young master that I've never really betrayed the 5-star army." "All right, I will. I definitely will." Yang Si also replied with a face full of excitement. He deeply felt the weakness in Shi Bei's heart at this moment and decided to tell him a piece of good news. "Commander Shi, I've already detained the people from the investigation team. After I see you, I'll send a telegram to the young master and explain the situation here in detail. Is there anything else you want to pass along?" "What? The people from the investigation team were detained?" Shi Bei's face was filled with shock after hearing this. It was just an investigation team of 6 people. Of course, Shi Bei didn't care about them. Any random team in the new Second Army could easily take care of them. However, the problem was that they were sent by the headquarters. They were the orders of City Lord Yu Qian. Yang Qindong also acquiesced. This gave them a lot of glory. They were like imperial envoys holding an imperial sword. No one dared to provoke them. They didn't even care about commanders and division commanders. Such people were actually detained by Yang Si. Shi Bei wasn't happy at this moment, but worried. He pulled Yang Si's hand and said, "Division Commander Yang, I'm afraid this isn't appropriate." After all, they did find out some problems. The problem Shi Bei was talking about was Tan Ying, the deputy commander of the 2nd Regiment of the new 2nd Army's 1st Cavalry Division. This person was the first person the investigation team called to talk to. The facts proved that they weren't shooting at random. This person was actually Bai Ming's man. To be specific, he really surrendered when the new 2nd Army pretended to surrender to Bai Ming. He became Baiming's spy in the new Second Army. It was because the Disciplinary Investigation Department obtained this information that they sent the investigation team. They also obtained City Lord Yu Qian's consent and Yang Qindong's acquiescence. It was also because of this that Muda dared to detain the 1st Cavalry Division's commander, Kang Ji. It was also because of this that Shi Bei couldn't raise his head. This was because he couldn't guarantee that there weren't any Baiming spies in the new Second Army. This also made the investigation team open and aboveboard. The problem wasn't discovered by them. It was our intelligence department that obtained this clue first and then reported it to the headquarters. Then, it was handed over to the Disciplinary Investigation Department to handle. At the end of the day, Muda and the others only benefited from this information. Yes, that Tanning deserves to die. He actually ate our 5-star army's food and worked for Baiming. However, this doesn't mean that the other officers are the same. We can't spoil the whole pot of soup because of a piece of rat **t. Don't worry, I know how to report this to the young master. Yang Si said seriously. These words were said with reluctance, and he kept nodding his head. Obviously, he agreed with this statement. Seeing that Shi Bei agreed with his opinion, Yang Si hesitated for a moment before saying, "But Commander Shi, after Tan Ying's incident, we still have to investigate. My opinion is that we can transfer the new Second Army's officers in batches. After we confirm that there are no problems, we can arrange for them to be transferred to new positions." This was the main reason why Yang Si had come to look for other people. No matter what, Shi Bei was still the commander of the new Second Army. If they were to move her officers, and it was a big move, it was reasonable for them to inform her first. Of course, we won't move the main officers. We also won't move those officers who have already been checked and confirmed that there are no problems. Yang Si was afraid that Shi Bei wouldn't understand, so he made a promise overnight. They could move the officers, but they couldn't move too many of them. Otherwise, it would really hurt the new Second Army's foundation. Yang Si wanted to continue explaining because he wanted to lower Shi Bei's guard. If even the commander couldn't figure it out, then the new Second Army's ability to work would definitely drop. What Yang Si didn't expect was that right after he finished speaking, Shi Bei already nodded in agreement before he could even say some comforting words. Division Commander Yang Si, I wholeheartedly agree with this matter. After going through this crisis, the new Second Army can't be messed up anymore. The headquarters is willing to screen them for us. This will save us a lot of work. Shi Bei actually agreed. Yang Si said somewhat embarrassedly, Commander Shi, these are your heartfelt words. You can't let your emotions affect your decisions. Of course they are heartfelt words. First, there was Su Yuan in the new Second Army, and now there's Tan Ying. To be honest, I'm almost too ashamed to face anyone. If the headquarters can investigate the background of these officers, it's of course a good thing for the new Second Army's combat power. Oh right, I have one more request. Sure enough, Shi Bei still had a backup plan. Yang Si didn't immediately agree. Instead, he said with a smile, Commander Shi, there are no outsiders here. Just say what you want. Then I'll say it. I only have one request. Can you let the new Second Army participate in the war? Only in war can we quickly gather people's hearts. Shi Bei said with a face full of hope. He stared at Yang Si's eyes fiercely. Hearing that he wanted to participate in the war, Yang Si shook his head. He could understand Shi Bei's feelings, but such a big matter was far from being decided by him. The most important thing was that now the new Second Army's problem hadn't been thoroughly investigated. No one would be at ease to let such an army rush to the front line. If there was a betrayal before the battle, wouldn't it really cost people's lives? Yang Si had such a thought in his mind, but some words couldn't be said like this. He found an excuse and said, I'm afraid this matter is not easy to handle. Commander Shi is also a person who has fought in wars. You should know the importance of logistics and provisions. Right now, Shaojing and Jingzhou are the main transit points for logistical supplies. Your new Second Army is very familiar with the situation here. If another army were to take over, I'm afraid it would be very easy for problems to arise. Of course, this was a reason. Xi Bei could understand the meaning behind these words. In fact, when he made the request, he didn't have much confidence. He said these words to prove his determination. Yang Si immediately rejected, and Xi Bei didn't mention it again. No matter what, the investigation team's people were detained, which was a good thing for the new Second Army. This was because the investigation team was clearly biased. Under the preconceived idea that everyone had problems, it was quite difficult for them to deal with the new Second Army's problem fairly. After comforting Xi Bei also promised that she would throw herself into work with a new attitude as soon as possible. Yang Si left the new Second Army's military headquarters. At the entrance of the military headquarters, he saw the soldiers he brought with him. "Master, the interrogation results are out. There is indeed a problem with Muda, let's go back and talk." Hearing that the results were out so quickly, Yang Si was also very surprised. He didn't know that in front of the fierce and murderous soldiers, Muda, who only knew how to talk big but was very afraid of death, couldn't last more than a few rounds. Chapter 1236. In the royal palace of Turpan, Yang Qindong was looking at the military situation map in front of the sand table. Beta Persei came to his side and whispered, "Young master, Yang Si sent an urgent message, it's about the disciplinary investigation department." "Urgent?" Yang Qindong slowly turned around when he heard this. Something big must have happened to be able to add the word urgent before the telegram. "Yes, this is the content of the telegram," Beta Persei said as he respectfully handed the telegram he had just received to Yang Qindong. Although Beta Persei and Yang Si had a good relationship. But if it wasn't for the urgency of the matter, he wouldn't dare to disturb Yang Qindong, who was thinking about military combat plans. To be able to do this, it could only prove one thing, that something big had happened. Yang Qindong took the telegram, and after the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the telegram was fiercely thrown to the ground. "What does this Meng Ziliao want to do? Does he want to disrupt the morale of my army?" The so-called Meng Ziliao was the vice minister of the Disciplinary Investigation Department, second only to Chief Guan Wenzheng. Because he was very filial, learned a lot of literature, and wrote good essays, he was valued by Yu Qian and several other officials in Qiqian City. After a period of experience in other departments, they found that he was a talent, and this time, they recommended him to be the first vice minister of the Disciplinary Investigation Department. It could be said that he held great power and reached the sky in one step. From this point, it could also be seen that Confucianism still had a deep influence on Yu Qian and others, and this was also unchangeable. After all, how could something that had been passed down for thousands of years be changed just like that? But this person, because he was too filial, this time, he actually used his power for personal gain and helped his elder brother, the vice minister of the Army Staff Division, Meng Ziliao. It was said that Meng Zitong was also a capable person. He had a good grasp of the battle situation and had a good view of the overall situation. He had once been praised by Leng Song, the deputy commander of the army headquarters. He had also been recommended to Yang Qindong more than once. However, Yang Qindong considered that this person did not have any experience in leading troops. Everything he learned was just theory. Hence, he did not give him any important tasks, citing that there was no suitable position. Of course, Meng Zitong didn't know that this was Yang Qindong's excuse. He thought that there was really no suitable position. Therefore, he had been waiting. This time, the Five-Star Army had consecutively established the 5 new armies, the First Army and the Second Army in the primordial city. All of a sudden, there were 3 vacancies for commanders, so he had no choice but to consider it. For this reason, he pestered Leng Song every day, and basically obtained his support. Meng Zitong never expected that Yang Qindong would have the final say in this matter. Other than some division commanders, deputy division commanders, and regimental commanders who were transferred from the army headquarters, the 3 corps commanders were all personally appointed by him. This made Meng Zitong very disappointed. Originally, there should have been a position for him among the 3 corps commanders. This huge contrast from hope to disappointment made him unable to bear it. However, what made him even more disappointed was that the 3 corps commanders in the new army that was about to be established would also be selected from the current division commanders. This made him unable to see the future for a while. When he returned home, he sighed because of this. All of this was seen by his younger brother, Meng Zitong. This Meng Zitong, who was extremely filial to his parents and had deep feelings for his elder brother, after a psychological struggle, set his goal on the position of the new Second Army's commander. Wasn't there no problem? Then he would use his authority to create a position. As long as he was willing to step down, the position of the corps commander would be vacant. Considering that there was such a big problem with the new Second Army, it should not be internally elected. The possibility of external transfer was very high. In this way, wouldn't his elder brother have hope? In order to complete this matter, Meng Zitong sent his trusted aides, Mu De and Chang Wu, to be the leader and deputy leader of the investigation team respectively. The reason why he sent out 2 people at once was probably because one of them did not do his best and the other could be a substitute. However, he did not expect that because he sent out 2 people, Chang Wu would be the first to confess when faced with Yang Xi's personal interrogation. Then, under pressure, Mu De repeated Meng Zitong's instructions to him. That was the main content of the telegram. Yang Xi was very sensible. He only described the process of the matter and did not make any suggestions on how to deal with it. Even so, Yang Qindong was burning with anger. The reason why he agreed to the investigation team's investigation in the new Second Army was because of Su Yuan and now Tanning. Yang Qindong did not want any traitors in the army. He still needed to be on guard when fighting against external forces. In addition, Yu Qian was the one who suggested it, so he did not refuse. Now, it seemed that some people had taken advantage of the loophole. Did they really think that he was so easy to use? Yang Feidian. Yang Qindong's face was filled with anger, and his eyes flashed with anger. Telegram Yang Wu and ask him to investigate this matter secretly. If it's true, send Meng Zitong and Meng Zitong to prison for abusing their power for personal gain and convict them because of City Lord Qian. Yang Qindong's voice carried a trace of viciousness. It was true that these 2 people were talented. Once they were used well, they might be able to do a lot of work or even big things. However, this could not be the reason why they could use their power for personal gain. He wanted to use this matter to tell everyone that in Yangxia and the 5-star army, there were many capable people, but loyalty was more important. If there was no loyalty and a selfish person in their heart, no matter how capable they were, no one would value them. Beta Persei wrote down the contents of the telegram and turned to leave. Of course, he had also heard of these 2 people. For example, Meng Zitong. Leng Song had once looked for Beta Persei and recommended this person. But so what if they were capable? They dared to use public power for personal gain and even wanted to frame a current army commander. Just based on this, the 2 of them would probably not be able to get out of prison for more than 10 or 20 years. The telegram was sent very quickly. In just 3 days, Yang Wu, who had received the order, had investigated the matter clearly. Receiving Yang Qindong's order was like receiving an imperial sword. Everything he did was green light. When the evidence was conclusive, the 2 brothers, Meng Zitong and Meng Zitong, were taken away from their respective offices. Taking away 2 vice commanders at once, and both of them held important positions and were even blood brothers, this matter quickly caused a huge commotion in Crimson City. For this reason, after City Lord Yu Qian heard the news, he personally asked about this matter. Soon, Yang Wu went to meet Yu Qian, Ling Song, and the others respectively. When he left, these people who were found were all covered in cold sweat. They had actually used their power for personal gain to this extent. They actually wanted to frame a military commander in public, and a military commander who had performed meritorious deeds. Whether it was Yu Qian, Ling Song, or the others, they were all covered in cold sweat. These 2 people were recommended by them. More importantly, from the beginning of the investigation until the arrest of this matter, no one had informed them. What did this prove? Yang Qindong was already very dissatisfied with this matter. This was what made them feel afraid. Immediately, Yu Qian and the others quickly wrote a letter of apology and sent it to Yang Qindong in the form of a telegram. In this regard, Yang Qindong did not reply and acted as if this matter had never happened. The reason why he did this was because Yang Wu had called and said that this matter was completely the fault of the Meng brothers. City Lord Yu Qian and the others had no idea at all. In the end, they were just being used by others. Since that was the case, why would Yang Qindong reply? Not replying was also a kind of attitude. Think about it yourselves. The matter was handled so badly, the most important thing to consider was how to correct it in the future. When this matter was revealed, those who knew the inside story were in an uproar, especially those who were arrogant because of their talents. They even tucked their tails between their legs. Who said that you had to be valued by others just because you were talented? Once you did something wrong, the building would collapse in an instant. This rang the alarm bell for many people, and it also made the atmosphere between the various departments in Crimson City correct. Things like private power being used in public were naturally reduced by a lot. The strategy of making a show of the mountain to scare the tiger was very effective. Since there was a problem with Muda's investigation team, as the chief, Guan Wenzheng, quickly sent a new investigation team. This time, there were more than 30 members in the investigation team. They did things according to the principles of openness and fairness. Soon, the new Second Army was on the right track after changing a batch of officers. After the investigation team concluded that there was no problem, Kang Zhi was acquitted and restored to his position. There was also the company commander, Li Yun. Just like his name, his luck was good. He was actually chosen by Yang Si and transferred to the logistics division as an advisor. It could be imagined that after a period of experience, it was likely that he would be able to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat when he was sent out. The new Second Army resumed its normal order. More and more troops, civilians, and provisions were transported from here to Yili. The war was about to begin. Ala Mountain Pass. After the 1st Cavalry Division led by Dai Kuo left Turpan City, they rushed towards their destination. Not long after he set off, 30,000 cavalrymen also came out of Yili City. They were Tushi's troops who were responsible for watching the 1st Cavalry Division under the order of King Harden Barter. Tushi was a general of the younger generation of Turpan. Because he was chosen by King Harden Barter, he was promoted from an ordinary commander who led thousands of troops to a general who led 30,000 cavalrymen. For a moment, he was full of pride and confidence for the future. As soon as he sent out a division, the other side sent out 3 times the number of troops to follow closely behind. When the news was reported to Yang Qindong, his eyes showed an expression of, as expected. Yang Qindong had considered 3 solutions for the main force of the 1st Cavalry Division being surrounded at the Ala Mountain Pass. First, use the 1st Cavalry Division as a bait to attract more enemies, and finally have a decisive battle in the middle. Second, let the 1st Cavalry Division break out of the encirclement. Presumably, with their strength and preparation, for times the number of enemies really couldn't do anything to them. Then they would look for an opportunity to fight again. Third, no matter what, gather a large number of troops and continue to attack. Besieging Wei to save Zhao would naturally solve the problem of the 1st Cavalry Division being surrounded. Chapter 1237. The 3 plans constantly lingered in Yang Qindong's mind, but in the end, he still chose the first plan. The second plan was a passive defense, which was not what Yang Qindong liked. The third plan was a little too risky, especially when the reinforcements were still on the way and had yet to arrive. It was a little rash. Only the second plan required a certain amount of time to prepare. He could take the opportunity to wait for more reinforcements to appear and fight a big battle. Just like how Yang Qindong didn't know that Kazakh had dispatched 80,000 cavalry, his enemies also didn't know that there were 3 5-star army reinforcements coming to Yili County. Send a signal to Commander Dai Kuo, tell him to slow down and delay for some time. At the same time, order the reconnaissance group and the light cavalry to set off. I want to see how many troops they will send. Yang Qindong slammed his right fist on the sand table and said in a firm tone. After the order was issued, Ding Shan led the reconnaissance group and Ma Xiangshan led the light cavalry, a total of 10,000 cavalry, to Lufan City. As soon as the news came out, General Aleifu of the Yarqiang tribe also led 30,000 cavalry to follow. It was the same as the 1st Cavalry Division that followed Dai Kuo before. 3 times the number of troops surrounded them. Interesting. Looking at the 3 times the number of troops, Yang Qindong smiled and looked at Beta Persei and said, Suhi's new army should have rested enough. Send them out, I want to see if they can send 100,000 troops. After the order was issued, the new army under the leadership of Commander Suhi went out. As if to confirm Yang Qindong's words, the Walla cavalry suddenly sent 100,000 troops, led by one of the 4 remaining generals, Bo Muir, and followed. Oh! I almost forgot about my old friend Yes Hen. Yang Qindong immediately laughed when he heard the news. Then he narrowed his eyes and said, Send a message to the commander of the 1st Army, Su Ku. Tell him to attack the Walla army directly from behind and find an opportunity to destroy the enemy. On the current battlefield, it seemed that the anti-5-star army alliance had the upper hand. They had 240,000 troops. On the other hand, the 5-star army only had about 70,000 soldiers. This 3 times the number of the 5-star army seemed to be enough to defeat the 5-star army. However, once the 1st army joined the battle, they would have 30,000 soldiers. Then, the 2nd army and the 5-star armies would add up to another 70,000 soldiers. In total, they had 100,000 soldiers. The difference in military strength would be from 240,000 to 170,000. There would only be a difference of 70,000 people. Most of the soldiers on his side were veterans, while the other side had many new recruits. With the combat strength of the 5-star soldiers, this was no longer a problem. If they could heavily injure the 240,000 enemy troops, they would be able to destroy at least a third of the enemy's army. Yang Qindong had his own plans, but what he didn't know was that the enemy also had their own plans. Their target was him, the founder of the Yangxia Empire, the soul of the 5-star army, and the Bugnam of Gojoseon of the Great Ming Dynasty. They would use the 1st Cavalry Division at the Ala Mountain Pass as a gap to surround them. Then, they would lure in a large portion of the 5-star army's main force and destroy them. They would be the first target of the anti-5-star army alliance. Since there was a first, there would be a second. The second was to surround the Turpan Empire's capital, where Yang Qindong was. In order to achieve this goal, Lili, Turpan, and Yarqiang would each send out 20,000 troops. Yes Hen would send out 40,000 troops, which was all of his remaining troops. Adding on the 80,000 troops from the Kazakh army, they had a total of 180,000 people. They were only attacking a single capital, so they were filled with confidence. The 5-star army sending out their troops did not surprise Yes Hen and the others. In their eyes, it would be strange if Yang Qindong didn't send out his troops. After all, the 1st Cavalry Division was the elite force of the 5-star army. They couldn't just watch and do nothing. With their advantage in numbers, as long as the 5-star army sent out reinforcements, Lili and the others would send out 3 times the number of reinforcements. At the same time, the dark plan was to take advantage of the fact that Turpan City did not have enough troops to attack. If they could take down Yang Qindong, the 5-star army would be torn apart. In order to complete this plan, Yes Hen was going all out. Not only did he send out all of his 140,000 cavalry, but he also used the 100 cannons that he had bought from Baiming. In short, he wanted Yang Qindong to die. A mountain could not accommodate 2 tigers. There could only be 1 king on the grasslands. In Yeshin's eyes, Yang Qindong was the biggest obstacle to him becoming the king. What he needed to do now was to kill this person who was the biggest threat to him. After that, he would regain his position as the overlord of the grasslands. Turpan City. A large number of the 5-star army was sent out. Until now, Yang Qindong only had the 20,000 Mongol army and the 2,000 black cavalry by his side. Oh right, there was also the 4th Division, who was escorting a large number of rations and other military resources to Turpan City. The reason why he did not send Narisong out was because this cavalry was made up of various Mongol tribes. Although there were many of them, their combat strength was a level lower. Such a cavalry force would not have a problem winning a battle. However, once they were surrounded, it would be difficult for them to form an independent army. If they were sent out and surrounded, it would be very dangerous. They would be the first army to be attacked by the enemy. Yang Qindong didn't want Narisong's 20,000 cavalrymen to fall into the danger of being surrounded and killed. Moreover, they hadn't occupied Lufan City for a long time, so the city still needed to be stabilized. The security of the 200,000 people in the city also needed someone to stay behind and manage. The ones left behind were not the strongest. Yang Qindong didn't want them to charge into battle with the enemy, but they could still be used to maintain order in the city and manage the ordinary people. It had to be said that in a foreign land, they could not unleash the full strength of the 5-star army. Just managing the hearts of the people required a lot of effort. When Yang Qindong did not want Narisong's 20,000 Mongol cavalry to be surrounded, they were still surrounded. Moreover, they were surrounded along with Yang Qindong. The news came from the Security Bureau and the CIA. Turpan, Ili, and Yarkyang had each sent out 20,000 cavalry, and their target was Turpan City. They're finally here. Towards this news, Yang Qindong was not surprised. Since he could surround Turpan City, why couldn't the enemy do the same? It was just that he did not think much of it. It was just 60,000 Mongol cavalry. How could it be so easy to take down Turpan City? Although Narisong's Mongol army was not strong, they could still defend against 60,000 Mongol cavalry. Yang Qindong had never been a careless person. As a precaution, he still gave the order to the 4th Master Lu, who was rushing over to the capital of Turkmenistan, to speed up the operation and report back to him as soon as possible. Once he had the 4th Lu division by his side, Yang Qindong would not be afraid of anyone attacking the city. The telegram was sent out, and there was a reply very quickly. However, it was not good news. Commander Ling Dechang said that there were at least 40,000 Mongol cavalry around them. If not for the firearms in their hands, they would have charged over long ago. However, these Mongol cavalry still relied on the speed of their warhorses and their proficient riding skills to fire arrows from time to time, slowing down the 4th Lu Division's advance. Commander Ling Dechang also said that at this rate, it would take them at least 10 days to reach Turpan City. 10 days? That's enough. Send a telegram to Commander Ling Dechang. Tell him to play it safe and not act rashly. Yang Qindong snorted. He had already guessed that the ones blocking the 4th Lu Division were Yeshin's Wara. Were they finally unable to bear it anymore? But so what if they slowed down the 4th Lu Division's advance? They were a fully equipped Mongol cavalry master, not someone that could be touched by 40,000 Mongol cavalry masters. Otherwise, they would not be able to return. As long as he defended Turpan City to the death for 10 days, once the 4th Lu Division arrived, the siege would collapse on its own. At this moment, Yang Qindong was still full of confidence, but he never expected that everything would change in the afternoon. Before the 60,000 cavalry from the other 3 countries arrived, 80,000 cavalry had already appeared outside Turpan, surrounding the city so tightly that not even a drop of water could escape. If not for the fact that Yang Qindong was cautious and gave the order to close the city gates, these 80,000 Mongol cavalry masters would have taken the opportunity to charge into the city. However, even if they did not attack immediately, the appearance of these 80,000 Mongol cavalry masters was still out of Yang Qindong's expectations. Shortly after, General Song also reported that in this short period of time, many civilians in the city had suddenly launched a counterattack against the Mongol army. Although the number of casualties was not high, it took up a lot of their energy and they were unable to fully defend the city. The civilians of Turpan City did not have the time to move out. They had only been informed of the relevant policies and laws. If not for the siege outside, these civilians might have approved of Yang Xie's actions. But now, even if they were rescued by their own people, most of them still wanted to return to Turpan City. No matter how Turpan treated them in the past, this was still their roots. Not everyone would forget about righteousness for the sake of profit. Many of them had their own standards, and many of them were unwilling to leave their homeland. Inform Commander Dao Xiao to send out his 2nd Battalion to patrol the streets. If there are any provocations, kill them. Yang Qindong's eyes flashed with anger. He was willing to think for the civilians of Turpan City not because he was afraid of them, but because he wanted to integrate all of them. That's right, it was the integration of all races, not the unity of all races. Yang Qindong did not believe that different races could live well together without any conflicts. The only reason why they had not appeared was because the time was not right. Chapter 1238. In order to prevent future troubles and to create a harmonious environment for future generations, Yang Qindong wanted there to be only one nation and one nation in this world. When everyone was a part of it, they would forget their previous identities. After 2 or 3 generations, they would slowly get used to it. This way, the so-called differences between nations would slowly disappear. Of course, in order to achieve this, there must be a prerequisite. The farmers must have their own land, the merchants must have their own products, and the workers must have their own strength. All in all, everyone would have food to eat, everyone would have work to do, and everyone would be able to live a better life through their own efforts. Yang Qindong wanted to use his own efforts to let the citizens live a better life. Even if it was a foreign race, he would not be too prejudiced. The prerequisite was that the Han people's rights would not be harmed, and they would not be treated unfairly. In fact, they would even be treated better than others. He believed that if this continued, there would be a day when the world would belong to the Han people. However, this did not mean that he was afraid of these foreign people, especially those who opposed him. If they went overboard, he would not mind killing one as an example to others. Just like now, it was a special period. With the sudden appearance of external enemies, he would not allow any internal problems to occur. After Dao Xiao received the order, he excitedly led 1,000 black cavalry soldiers out of the palace. When they arrived on the streets, their murderous aura frightened many people. Some people who originally wanted to take advantage of the situation could not help but reveal shocked expressions. They were already considering whether it was appropriate to make a move now. However, there were always some people who did not believe in heresy. Some of them were staunch nationalists who only wanted to be Turkmen. Even if they had to die, they would die here. There were also some people who had opportunistic thoughts. They had seen how the 5-star army treated the citizens. Not only did they not oppress them, they even helped the citizens. This was something that they had never seen before. Because of this, these people did not believe that the previously benevolent 5-star army would suddenly turn hostile. When these two types of people gathered together, they decisively made their move when they saw the black cavalry passing through the streets in an orderly manner to restore order and security in the city. They rushed towards the black cavalry with sticks and some iron weapons. They were challenging the dignity of the 5-star army and challenging Yang Qindong's bottom line. Stop! Anyone who comes within 10 meters will be killed. The awe-inspiring Blade Howl did not immediately give the order to kill. Instead, he gave the enemy a chance to retreat. However, such kindness was seen as weakness by some people. Some of the red-eyed people ignored Dao Zhao's warning and continued to charge forward. There were even some people shooting arrows in the dark. Obviously, they wanted to muddy the waters and fish in troubled waters to reap the benefits. Arrows pierced through the air and landed in the midst of the black cavalry. Some of the arrows even hit the bodies of the Black Knight Dragon Guards, but they were all blocked by the black armor made of fine iron that had extremely strong defensive properties. There were still people charging forward and shooting arrows. At this moment, anger flashed across Dao Zhao's face. He spat out a word, "Kill." The black cavalry, who had long been enraged and could not wait any longer, immediately drew their bows and arrows and launched a counterattack at the targets in their eyes. A series of arrows were reflected and dozens of shouts came from the darkness. Those were the people who wanted to shoot arrows. Cries of agony rang out on the streets. Over 60 bandits with various weapons had been shot by arrows, and there were still some who had not died. At this moment, loud cries of pain came from their mouths. The black cavalry retaliated. The moment they attacked, it was like a thunderbolt. They did not have the slightest intention of holding back. This scene frightened many people. Human nature was often like this. The more you retreated, the more they would think that you were weak and easy to bully. They would then become even more vicious and act like an evil person. On the other hand, once you acted tough, they would feel fear from the bottom of their hearts. At this time, they would become docile sheep, waiting to be slaughtered and dealt with. The black cavalry's sudden counterattack obviously had the effect of the latter. In an instant, many people shut their mouths. Many people in the dark put down their weapons. They were shocked and frightened by such a decisive action. Patrol the streets in groups of 50. If there are similar cases, kill. Dao Xiao's eyes did not show any signs of weakness. He knew that blindly killing would not solve the problem. However, there were times when showing off one's fists was very effective. Just like now. Everyone was looking at him in shock. The murderous aura that he had felt before had subconsciously lessened. This was the benefit of killing to stop killing. After the order was given, groups of black cavalry instantly went far away and headed to other nearby streets. To be able to become the capital of Tulyifan, the city was not small. The places that they needed to patrol were also very wide. Dao Xiao did not leave. Instead, he stayed with a group of 50 people. Behind them were the Mongolian cavalry and some Tulyifan youths who had volunteered to join the 5-star army. They were busy clearing the streets. It was just like how there had been traitors in China. There were people who lowered their heads to the strong everywhere. Although these people did not have any backbone, wasn't this what Yang Qindong needed? The appearance of the second group of black cavalry instantly suppressed the chaos in Tulyifan's capital. Occasionally, there were some who managed to escape. However, at this moment, they could only hide in dark corners and did not dare to do anything. After the internal problems were dealt with, the next step was to deal with the external enemies. Very soon, a piece of news reached Yang Qindong's ears. Apart from the 20,000 Walla cavalry that was personally led by Yes Hen, there were 60,000 cavalry that belonged to the Kazakh Khanate. Of course, Yang Qindong was not unfamiliar with the Kazakh Khanate. After all, this was the next place that he wanted to conquer. From the information that the intelligence department had sent over, the Kazakh Khanate was currently at war and had not been completely unified. Now, it seemed that the intelligence was lagging behind. Speaking of which, this could not be blamed on the intelligence department. Yang Qindong's speed in conquering the Kazakh Khanate had greatly exceeded the expectations of many people. It was the same for the intelligence department. They had only been established for less than 10 years and did not have a strong foundation. Furthermore, the Kazakh Khanate was simply too far away from Yang Xie's sphere of influence. No one had thought that they would meet in such a short period of time and even go to war. Naturally, the intelligence department there was limited, so it was normal that they did not send back any timely information. Looks like this Yes Hen is becoming more and more mature. Yang Qindong's reaction was so fast that he instantly thought of a lot of things, including the fact that the 1st Cavalry Division was surrounded by a large number of troops. It must have been planned a long time ago. One part of the plan was to kill him. 80,000 cavalry surrounded the city, but he only had 20,000 B-class troops and 2,000 black cavalry troops. But in the end, the number was still too small. Now, he had to face 80,000 cavalry, and then there would be the support of 60,000 cavalry from the other 3 countries. The situation was very bad no matter how he looked at it. Young Master, immediately send a report to the new army and ask Commander Su He to lead the troops back. Beta Persei also felt an unprecedented tension and could not help but give an idea. No. Yang Qindong shook his head. He also thought of this method just now, but then he rejected it. Since he could think of it, how could the enemy not think of it? They had also sent out 100,000 Walla soldiers, but they were right behind the new Third Army. If they were to turn back at this time, a bloody battle would be inevitable. Although the new army's strength was not bad, the 100,000 Walla army were also elite cavalry. With 3 times the number difference, it would not be easy to deal with them. If they were not careful, they would be surrounded and eaten. Seeing that Yang Qindong rejected the suggestion, Beta Persei said anxiously, "Then send a signal to the commander of the 4th Division and ask him to speed up the march and come back as reinforcements." No. Yang Qindong rejected again. The 4th Division had the heavy responsibility of escorting the provisions. There were a total of 1,000 carriages of military supplies, all of which were needed by the 5-star army when they ventured deep into the inner regions in the future. There was no room for any mishaps. Otherwise, the soldiers would have no food and no pay. How could such an army display their fighting strength? This would not do, that would not do. For a moment, Beta Persei was anxious. His mission was to protect Yang Qindong's safety. He did not dare to imagine what would happen if something happened to the young master. He was afraid that even if he did not blame himself, the other brothers would take his life. Seeing that things were not going well, he could only take a step back and say, "Young master, then we will give up on the capital of Turpan. While the encirclement is not fully formed yet, our 2,000 black cavalry will protect you and open a bloody path." No. Right now, a lot of provisions and gold and silver have been hoarded in the capital. Although most of these were left behind by Harden Barter when he escaped, they are now in our hands. These things are ours, we can't hand them over. After Yang Qindong rejected the idea, Beta Persei was speechless. If it was any other time, he would inevitably say that they valued money more than their lives. Beta Persei finally stopped talking. He turned to Yang Qindong and said with a smile, "Well, you don't have to worry. The enemy hasn't attacked yet. You have to have confidence in yourself and in our warriors." Beta Persei smiled bitterly. Obviously, he thought that this was the young master's way of comforting him. With 22,000 people, he had to face 80,000, no. It was 140,000 cavalry. He really had no chance of winning. Okay, since that's the case, send a telegram to Ling Daqiang. Tell him about the situation here and ask him to send an advance march here. Well, don't forget to remind him that if anything goes wrong with the money and food, he will lose his position as a division commander. Also, don't inform the other army, division, or regimental units about the encirclement. Yang Qindong said with a very serious face. He knew too well that if he didn't say it harshly, once Ling Daqiang knew that they were in danger, he would definitely bring his army to kill them. If that was the case, the money and food would be taken advantage of by the enemy cavalry. This was something that Yang Qindong absolutely didn't want to see. Seeing that Yang Qindong had agreed, Beta Persei's face lit up with joy. After agreeing, he ran straight to the dispatch room. Chapter 1239. The 4th Division of the Lu Army. It had a total of 8,400 soldiers. However, such an army of less than 10,000 was escorting 1,000 carriages of food and fodder pulled by livestock on the land of a foreign country, and no one dared to provoke them. Just like now, they could see the silhouettes of cavalrymen in the distance, but they did not dare to get close to this army. It wasn't because of anything else, but because just 2 hours ago, a Kazakh Khanate cavalry squad of 300 intended to charge over from a relatively narrow area, but they were indeed routed 200 meters away. 200 meters was the time when the muskets showed their prowess and bows were powerless. None of the 300 cavalrymen survived, all of them killed by bullets. This scene shocked many people, and it also made the Kazakh Khanate cavalrymen cower. Of the 40,000 cavalrymen that surrounded the 4th Division, there were 20,000 Walla cavalrymen and 20,000 Kazakh Khanate cavalrymen. However, facing the 4th Division of the Lu Army, the Walla cavalrymen who had already suffered countless losses naturally did not dare to act rashly. Instead, it was the Kazakh Khanate cavalrymen who charged forward. In the end, they suffered a huge loss. Because of this, General Gu Lijiang had no choice but to give the order to follow from afar and not get close. The blood of the 300 corpses had not dried up yet, and with this as an example, no one dared to take the initiative to approach. This allowed the 4th Division of the Lu Army to proceed forward safely. When General Gu Lijiang saw this scene, he was furious. He went to find the general of the Walla cavalrymen, the deputy general that Yes Hen trusted a lot, Chao Lu. General Chao Lu, the 5-star army's muskets are so powerful. What's the point of us following them? This was what Gu Lijiang could not understand. Since they could not get close, what were the 40,000 people doing here? To watch the show. If he knew this would happen, he would have followed the army to attack Turpan. That way, the siege would be faster. Compared to Gu Lijiang's dissatisfaction and impatience, Chao Lu's face was calm and unhurried. General Gu Lijiang, there's no need to be anxious. Since the leader asked us to come here, he naturally has his reasons. Don't worry, we will be needed soon. Chao Lu was right. At this moment, the temporary headquarters of the 4th Division was indeed in an uproar. Beta Persei had sent a telegram. When he found out that Turpan city was surrounded by a large number of troops and that Yang Qindong only had 20,000 Mongolian cavalry besides the 2,000 black cavalry, De Chang was shocked. He immediately ordered the commanders to come to a meeting. He even had the urge to give up everything to rescue Yang Qindong, because he knew very well that without the 6th young master, what would happen to the 5-star army in the future? The 4 regimental commanders were confused. When they arrived at the temporary headquarters, they wanted to ask what had happened. However, when they saw Division Commander De Chang's face, which was as dark as the night, they didn't dare to ask. Instead, their gazes landed on a telegram beside the table. Out of curiosity, the first commander, Gao Xiang, reached out and took the telegram. He originally thought that it wasn't important, otherwise, it wouldn't have been thrown here. But when he read the contents of the telegram, his eyes widened and his breathing became heavy. Sir, my 1st regiment requests to go to battle. What's going on? The other 3 regiment commanders also walked over in succession, surprised by Regiment Commander Gao Xiang's reaction. However, when they all saw the contents of the telegram, they all had the same reaction. 2nd Regiment Commander He Wen, 3rd Regiment Commander Lu Zheng, and 4th Regiment Commander Yi Xingfeng all shouted in unison, Division Commander, our 2nd Regiment, 3rd Regiment, 4th Regiment, requests for battle. All of you, shut up. Ling Dechang was very satisfied with his subordinates' performance, but he immediately stopped them. Now that the 6th young master is in danger, even if he requests to go to battle, it won't be your turn. I've thought about it, I'll personally lead the team. When he said that he would personally lead the team, the 4 commanders were first stunned, then they all objected in unison. No. Why not? Ling Dechang had already thought of this result, but at this moment, he had already made up his mind. Even if he had to risk being punished, he wouldn't change his mind. It just won't do. The 6th young master once said that unless it's necessary, a division-level leader can't personally go to the battlefield. Although the situation is dangerous now, there's no need for you to personally lead the team. The first commander, Gao Xiang, was the first to come up with a reason to object. Compared to the other commanders, Gao Xiang, as the first commander, was undoubtedly the strongest. He was also someone who had been recognized by Yang Qindong, just like the other commanders who could only address Yang Qindong as Bugnam of Gojoseon, but he could already be called the 6th young master. This change in address represented a difference in status. Yes, now is not the time for the survival of the 4th Division Lu, so you can't personally lead the troops. The other 3 commanders also expressed their opinions. On one hand, everyone was indeed concerned about Ling Dechang's safety, but the most important thing was that they wanted to snatch this job. Once he was going to lead the team, they naturally wouldn't have a chance. Ling Dechang was naturally aware of the thoughts of the 4 commanders under him. However, he didn't point it out. Instead, he said, I've made up my mind, so you don't have to persuade me anymore. Of course, I still need an assistant. Which of the 4 of you is willing to go with me? Ling Dechang had his own ideas. In the telegram, Yang Qindong said that he couldn't lose the provisions. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to be a division commander anymore. However, he didn't say that he couldn't lead the troops to save people. He took advantage of this loophole and decided to personally lead the troops. This also represented his respect and protection for Yang Qindong. Originally, the four commanders wanted to continue persuading Ling Deqiang to let go, but now, the moment he said that he still needed an assistant, the mentality of the four commanders immediately changed. Even if they couldn't be the main commander, it was still an extremely honorable thing to be the assistant commander. At that moment, the four commanders immediately started fighting for this position. They went back and forth, talking about their own advantages and the opponent's disadvantages. It was very lively. Yang Qindong was in Turpan City, which had already been surrounded. It was extremely urgent, so Ling Deqiang didn't want to listen to the commanders below continue fighting. He immediately shouted loudly, "Enough, don't say any more. How about this, I'll pick the generals. First commander, Gao Xiang. Here." When his name was called, Gao Xiang was full of energy. He was very happy, thinking that his division commander really thought the most highly of him. Gao Xiang's strength is outstanding, and he does things with ease. He will replace this division commander and continue to escort the provisions to Turpan City. Second regiment will cooperate with him. Third and fourth regiments will follow me to Turpan City to resolve the situation. Ling Deqiang was very clear that if these people continued to argue, there would never be a result. He might as well give the order himself. Gao Xiang, who had been called out, had a happy expression. When he heard that his strength was outstanding and he did things with ease, his face bloomed into a smile. However, the next words made him freeze on the spot as if he was struck by lightning. This shouldn't be like this, right? Didn't he already call out his name? Second Regiment Commander Hewen also had an ugly expression. He didn't think that he would be left behind. His expression was bitter. Some people were happy, while others were sad. Third Regiment Commander Lu Zheng and Fourth Regiment Commander Yi Xingfeng's faces were bright. If possible, they wanted to kiss Ling Deqiang's face right now to express their excitement. Since the order had been given, naturally it couldn't be changed. Seeing that the 3rd and 4th Regiment commanders had gone to gather the troops, Ling Deqiang looked at Gao Xiang and Hewen and said, "The two of you were left behind because I have high hopes for you. There's only one request. Even if the troops are small, the supplies are not lacking. In order to ensure the completion of the mission, I'll allow you to reach Turpan City a little later. However, the supplies cannot be lacking. Otherwise, you can just wait to become ordinary soldiers." This was the meaning of going all the way. No matter how unwilling Gao Xiang and Hewen were, they had to agree and do their best. Even if the number of troops was small, the mission was still to ensure quality and quantity. Just as the order was given, the 3rd and 4th regiments had already gathered. Every soldier brought 3 sets of ammunition to ensure that they had enough when facing the enemy. With Ling Deqiang's order, the 3rd and 4th regiments, as well as the guards of the division headquarters, walked out of the 4th regiment's troops and headed towards Turpan City. At this time, under Turpan City, the 60,000 Kazakh cavalry had already surrounded the city. Kelly finally heaved a sigh of relief. He had long heard that King Wunan of Damyang had a very elite black guard by his side. Their equipment was excellent, and their combat strength was unparalleled. If such an army suddenly charged out of the city, he really didn't have absolute confidence in stopping them. Now that the city was surrounded, the Black Guard still hadn't appeared. This made Kelly overjoyed. At the same time, he laughed heartily at the leader of the Wara, Yeshen, and said, "Great, Bugnam of Gojoseon has already lost his last chance to escape. According to the Han people, he's now a turtle in a jar. Next, he's at our mercy." Yeshen was also very happy. After planning for such a long time, the Kazakh cavalry that was arranged as a backup plan was finally used, and they also blocked Yang Qindong in the city, which made them see a bright future. Yeshen firmly believed that as long as Yang Qindong died, no one in the Great Ming army would be his opponent. At that time, it would be time for him to dominate. Previously, he could severely injure the Great Ming Emperor Zhu Qizhen. If Yang Qindong hadn't appeared, he could have even captured him alive. He believed that he could do the same in the future. The two of them were in a very good mood. At this moment, they should be drinking horse milk and eating mutton. However, before they saw Yang Chendong's head, they suppressed their excitement and sat together to discuss what to do next.